Chair, you have a live mic.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the commissioner meeting, and we have a big day today. Lots of things to talk about. So just want to remind you as we get started, please silence that cell phone, because inevitably somebody will have it going off, and I'll be more interested in your ringtone than I will thinking about what I got to do next. So with that, let's go with the pledge and the prayer.
Commissioners, we have special guests today for our invocation and pledge of allegiance. We have Scotland Hall, Daisy Hall, Sunny Hall, Shepherd Hall, and Miles Hall here to join us.
I'm praying for Commissioner Big Daddy. Lord, I pray for Commissioner Big Daddy that he will choose the right decisions in Naples, that when he thinks of his ideas, they will come out bright, and he'll do everything great in Naples.
I'm praying for Commissioner LaCastro. I thank you that you put peace in his mind, Lord, and that you put angels around him this year. And I pray that you give him the right decisions to make. In Jesus' name, amen.
I'm praying for Commissioner McDaniel, and dear God, I hope that he has the right decisions and knows what he's doing, and keeps on being a great commissioner. In Jesus' name, amen.
I'm praying for Commissioner Saunders, and I pray that he has wisdom to lead the county, and that he is a really good commissioner, and that he chooses right choices. In Jesus' name, amen.
I am praying for Commissioner Collier. I hope he has a good life and a good day, and I hope he be a good commissioner. In Jesus' name, amen.
Man.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good job, Chillings.
Just so you know, we call Commissioner Hall Big Daddy as well. It's just want to get it out there. It's on his bio, and he makes us do that, actually.
Call me Commissioner, call me Chris, call me Big Daddy. Just don't call me late for supper. All right.
Commissioners, agenda changes for March 12th, 2024. We do have an add-on item 16H4. This is a proclamation designating March 21st through 31st, 2024 as the 48th anniversary of the Collier County Fair. The proclamation will be mailed to Rhonda Ward, Collier Fair Manager, and this is added to the agenda at Commissioner McDaniel's request. We are moving item 3C1 to the March 26, 2024 BCC meeting. This is recognizing Nolan Sapp for his 46 years of dedicated public safety service upon retirement. Turns out Chief Sapp went to Disney World.
Oh, my goodness.
Move item 17A to 9A. This item requires the commission members to provide ex parte disclosure should a hearing be held on this item. This is a recommendation to approve a rezoning ordinance for the NBC RV mixed-use planned unit development, a portion of which remains in the rural fringe mixed-use district receiving lands zoning overlay to allow up to 356,000 square feet of commercial and industrial uses and 75 travel, trailer, recreational vehicle campground units on property located 450 plus minus feet northeast of the intersection of Basic Drive and Tamiami Trail East, 5 miles east of Collier Boulevard in Section 18, Township 51, South, Range 27 East, Collier County, Florida, consisting of 34 plus minus acres. And providing an effective date. Its companion item 17B is also being moved to the regular agenda to become item 9B. This is a recommendation to approve an ordinance amending the future land use element and future land use map and map series of the growth management plan to create the East Tamiami Trail mixed use subdistrict to allow up to 356,000 square feet of gross floor area of heavy commercial and industrial uses and up to 75 travel trailer recreational vehicle campground units. Again, the subject property is located 450 feet plus minus northeast of the intersection of Basic Drive and Tamiami Trail East, 5 miles east of Collier Boulevard in Section 18, Township 51 South, Range 27 East. Both of these items are being moved to the regular agenda at Commissioner LaCastro's request. Next, move item 16A 14 to 11F. This is a recommendation to direct staff to advertise and bring back an ordinance amending the Land Development Code to update the regulations relating to the removal of prohibited exotic vegetation. And this is being moved to the regular agenda by Commissioner LaCastro, Kowal, and Hall's separate requests. Move item 16F7 to 11G. This is a recommendation to award construction invitation to bid number 23-8182, the Caxambus Park and Boat Rehabilitation Project to Kelly Brothers, Inc. in the amount of $2,735,926.67. Authorize the chairman to sign the attached agreement and approve the necessary budget amendment. This is being moved at the separate requests of Commissioner LaCastro and Commissioner Kowal. A couple of agenda notes. Item 16B7 should be corrected to read as follows. A recommendation to authorize electronic submission by the county manager or designee of a small county outreach program for rural areas of opportunities application with the Florida Department of Transportation to fund the construction of a paved shoulder to improve safety on a segment of Immokalee Road in the amount of $999,855.21. We'll cover this for item 17A when it is on the regular agenda, but there is an attachment A, the revised ordinance for hours of operation. There's amended text. We'll address that when we get to that item as it is on the regular agenda now. We do have a series of time certain items, first of which is item 10A to be heard at 9:30 a.m. This is a recommendation to submit a community project funding application to Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart for $6 million to construct a Collier County Veteran Services Center and Museum. The next is item 11A to be heard at 10:30 a.m. to review a proposed ordinance amendment to Ordinance 2002-63, which established the Conservation Collier Program. Item 11B to be heard at 1 p.m., which is the after-action report for the 2024 legislative session. And item 11C to be heard no sooner than 1:30 p.m., which is a recommendation to accept a project update on the Collier County Behavioral Health Center and proceed with the design for 87 total beds. We have court reporter breaks scheduled for 10:30 and 2:50. And with that, County Attorney, any other changes?
No changes, ma'am.
Chair? Changes or ex parte on the consent agenda as the item on summary is being moved to regular?
Commissioner Kowal, any changes and ex parte?
I have no changes, and I have no ex parte.
Commissioner Saunders.
Mr. Chairman, I have no changes and no ex parte as well.
Commissioner LaCastro.
Same for me. No changes, no ex parte.
Commissioner McDaniel.
I have two things. Number one, thank you for the accommodation for the Collier County Fair that starts next week. That's a wonderful event. If you haven't ever attended, please go. It supports our 4-H. It's everything for what we do here in Collier County. And then on 16A12, I do have emails and phone calls.
And I have no changes and no ex parte.
If we could get a motion to accept the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion and second. All approved, say aye. Aye.
Troy.
Passes.
Commissioners, that brings us straight to proclamations, item 4A. Item 4A is a proclamation designating March 12th, 2024 as Gentlemen Against Domestic Violence Day in Collier County to be accepted by Sheriff Kevin Rambosk and other distinguished guests. Congratulations.
Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. Morning, sir. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you. Look, they're fixing to get direction. Look. Simon says, take one step to the right. There we go. Yeah. Photogenic bunch.
Morning, Chairman and Board. Kevin Rambos, Collier County Sheriff, as well as member of the Shelter's Board of Directors and a member of Gentlemen Against Domestic Violence. Thank you for recognizing this day and this effort. This group was established in 2008 and has been growing each and every year. And it really calls on all of us as gentlemen to stand as partners with women to stop domestic violence and human trafficking in Collier County. So we thank you for that. With me today, our founding fathers, Bob Connors, John Jordan, Jim Jesse, who are up here and recognized. We have other of our leaders, Ron Ciesla, Colum Estrom, and Corey Lazar, who put an extreme amount of time and effort into not only creating the program, but making it work year to year. Last year, unfortunately, we had 1,600 domestic violence-related calls to 911. We have to do everything we can to continue to stop that. And, it's not limited to any one neighborhood. It is throughout the county, and it costs us an estimated $30 million in impacts. So we're asking for all gentlemen in Collier County to stand with us and become a part of the solution to stopping domestic violence. And you might have seen in today's Naples Daily News, there are 350 plus committed gentlemen throughout the county that have made that commitment, and also did a awareness campaign last week that involved 60 people to go out throughout the community and let potential victims know of the resources available to them through Collier County and by the shelter. So I'd like to thank all of those members, all those that are with us today that created the program, that make it work, and all those throughout the county that help us to stop domestic violence each and every day. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Commissioners, item 4B is a proclamation designating March 10th through the 16th, 2024 as Sunshine Week in Collier County, to be accepted by Crystal Kinzel, Clerk of the Circuit Court and Comptroller, and members of the Finance and Board Minutes and Records. Congratulations.
That Hawaii feel.
That's the way I feel on the inside.
Yeah.
Big Daddy.
Yeah.
Commissioner, just a quick note, Crystal Kenzel. I brought up some of the staff because many in the public may not realize your board minutes and records, they take care of your information up on our fourth floor. And so they do that every day for the public's benefit. And so we want to celebrate them as individuals serving you guys. Thanks.
Commissioners, if we could get a motion to accept the proclamations.
So moved. Oh, second.
All right, motion and second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
That brings us to item 5. Item 5B is a presentation of the Collier County Business of the Quarter for March 2024 to True Fashionistas. The award will be accepted by Jennifer Johnson, owner, along with Brad Johnson and Christina Park, CEO, and Bethany Sawyer, Vice President of Membership and Investors, Greater Naples Chamber of Commerce. Congratulations.
That chamber's really tearing you up. It's tearing you up. It's tearing you, that chamber is a tough business. Wise.
Did y'all note Dan Cowell's suit this morning? Fashionistas.
Be a big poppy.
Smile till 3.
All right.
Thank you, commissioners, and to the Greater Naples Chamber. It is an honor to be the business of the quarter. So I'm Jennifer Johnson. My husband, Brad, and I started True Fashionistas 13 years ago. We are off of Airport and Vanderbilt in North Naples. And we started out 13 years ago with an 1,800 square foot store. And we grew that to the point of becoming the largest lifestyle resale store in the state of Florida. We have 13,000 square feet in the same plaza that we started in, and we have between 45 and 50 employees. And we sell online as well as in our store, and it is a great honor to have started here in Collier County and grown our business with our community here in Collier County. So thank you.
That brings us to item 7, public comments on general topics not on the current or future agenda.
We have 3 registered speakers this morning. Your first speaker is Richard Schrader. He'll be followed by Mary Davies Pitsy. No, she does not want to speak. I'm sorry. So Mr. Schrader will be followed by Dr. J.B. Holmes.
Richard Schroeder, Naples resident, retired physician. I want to speak just a little bit today about health risks of wireless radiation technology. And I may be a little out of my lane to be talking about wireless communications, so just consider this a mutual learning experience. But the fact is, there's been mounting evidence for decades that we humans in the plant and animal kingdom we depend on for our continued survival are at considerable risk from man-made radiation of many kinds. We're bathed in an electromagnetic smog 24/7 as a result of all the electronic goodies that we have adopted. With wired communication, like Ethernet communication for our computers or old-fashioned phone lines, so to speak, information is transmitted via the wires, and the electromagnetic fields and radiation are unintentional. They're not desired. Proper engineering can reduce these unwanted fields and radiation to a minimum. By contrast with wireless communication, the radiation is the product that actually does the job of transmitting the information. Wireless means radiation. We already know the dangers of radiation. I mean, picture your radiologist scampering behind the screen when they snap your x-ray, or the dental technician and so forth. Problem is, the ability to use wireless devices everywhere on Earth means that every square meter of the Earth must be irradiated at all times. Our mobile phones operate in what's called a microwave spectrum, with the result that the entire planet is now swimming in a sea of microwave radiation that's millions to perhaps even billions of times stronger than the radiation from the sun and the stars from which life evolved. And life is based not only on chemistry, the way we think of it as being in our cells and so forth, but more fundamentally on electricity. The unimpeded flow of electrons is essential to the functioning of our nerves, our metabolism, and even our heartbeat. Interference with these electric currents can therefore cause neurologic diseases, heart disease, metabolic diseases such as diabetes, cancer, and damage to germ cells that result in infertility. Maybe even more importantly, organisms that we depend on in our food chain that have a very high metabolism, such as bees and other insects, are being wiped out. Thousands and thousands of studies document the devastating effects of wireless radiation on mammals, birds, insects, amphibians, and forests. The finding that only a single 2-hour exposure to a mobile phone during their lifetime, even when the power of the phone was reduced 100-fold, cause permanent damage in young rats makes it likely that we are raising and perhaps have already raised a generation of children with brain damage. And there's a ton more evidence of cell phone risk from the government itself we don't have time to get into. There's no question that cell phones are not safe at any power level, at any distance from the head or for any duration, but what do? Well, one thing we need to do is understand a bit more about the telecom industry. Just to suffice it to say for now that the guidelines that are used for safety in this industry are very industry friendly and not based on science. So we'll talk more about that at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your next and final speaker for item 7 is Dr. J.B. Holmes.
Commissioners, Chairman Hall, my name is Holmes, Dr. J.B. Holmes. Thank you for having me speak today, or allowing me to speak. One, I would like to reinforce my invitation to all of you to attend the Vietnam Veterans Day recognition at Golden Gate VFW Post 7721 on Friday, March 29, 1800 hours. I'll leave that up to Commissioner Castro to translate the time for the civilians. But what I'd like to do is briefly, again, discuss the VA nursing home property. That legislation has been passed in the state legislature. Last Friday was voted on just after noon, and the language provided to me from that bill by Senator Pasadomo's office is, the department is authorized to submit an application for federal funds to construct a new veterans home and adult day health care center in Collier County. The source of the state funds is based on a memorandum of agreement between the department and the Collier County Board of County Commissioners to commit the necessary funds to be used as matching funds toward the construction and development costs of the new veterans nursing home and adult day care center. So it's gotten that far. It goes to the governor now for signature. Commissioner Saunders has spent, about 1,000 years up in Tallahassee, Commissioner? So you know how that process goes. And I ask that you would keep us well informed of the process and progress on that. Then I'd like to also speak, and I know it's coming up later in the program, on the recommendation to submit a Collier County project funding application to Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart for $6 million to construct a Collier County Veterans Service Center and Museum at the previously proposed location for a Collier County Public Schools Career and Tech Center adjacent to the planned Golden Gate Parkway entrance to the State Veterans Nursing Home and Adult Day Healthcare Campus. So I want to say that, one, we support that, and we vigorously support that. The veterans community will support that, and I ask that the county commissioners please support that $6 million proposal. And I understand there's $6 million set aside for development of the golf course. Already at this time, I ask that $6 million stay there, because I understand if that is pulled, Arthrex may pull their $20 million set aside for the golf course. So leave that and vigorously pursue the $6 million from Congressman Diaz-Balart, and I promise you the Collier County veterans will vigorously support you. You just advise me on what you would like us to do to support that proposal. Thank you, Commissioners.
Commissioners, we have about 6 minutes until we start our 9:30 time certain. We could take item 10B, which is a recommendation to nominate and appoint 5 members to the County Government Productivity Committee. I think that we can take care of that one.
Yes.
Anybody want to start with that, County Attorney? And guidance for the board before we get started on the nominations?
Multiple approaches to this. One approach that's been used in the past is, since we have 5 vacancies, each commissioner by district number would nominate somebody to the Productivity Committee. So we'd start with District 1.
I may have a recommendation. If we have recommendation from staff for all 5 of these positions.
I don't think we had any objections.
Yeah. If there's no objections.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a comment before we begin that process?
Sure.
Because I sit with that committee every month when they meet, and they've got subcommittees, and they work very hard. It's a really good group. There are 5 openings, but there are 5 members of that committee that are reapplying for reappointment. And I know the general policy has been, or at least there's been some interest in rotating these types of memberships, but I would ask that the board consider the reappointment of these 5. Again, I work with them. I know how hard they work, and they dig into this budgeting process and our expenditures, and I think maintaining that group would be most effective. So that would be my recommendation, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Commissioner McDaniel.
Yes, Bruce Hamels is a very involved individual in the community from Eastern Collier County. He's semi-retired, if not completely retired, and I would really like to see him take a position on there. And Commissioner Saunders, your comment with regard to the reappointment, there's 4 with dots that are reappointees, and then a 5th, necessarily one that's open. So I'd be happy with the reappointment of those that are reapplying and adding Bruce as the 5th. And simply because he's the only one from District 5.
Thought there were 5, but you're right, there are 4 that are reapplying.
Did you get that he said I was right? I just want to make sure that made the record.
Yeah, but just for the record, I'm trying to get his vote on the other 4. So.
All right, I got you. So, Mr. Hamels is who you would like to see on there?
I would.
Neil Schmidt had approached me and had great interest in doing this, but in all fairness, 3 out of those 4 are District 2 representatives, so I'm good with that.
Okay.
I think he'll understand that as well.
So with that, you want to make the motion? You want me to?
I still have I'm left.
Commissioner Kowal.
I know you give me a chance, all right? Now, you brought up the same point I saw when I did my research. I found out there was only 4 that reapplied. Right. But my other question was that we actually had 6 at large. Are we reducing the number now? Because now we only have 5 at large. Because that's all we're speaking about is the at-large positions, not the district representatives.
I think only 5 of those seats expired.
No, I got the list right here on 24, unless they go by months, or they go by the year.
No, it's just, that's what we have.
I was just reading the executive summary. It says 5 at-large seats had expired, but that must be incorrect.
Unless this is incorrect, I don't know. But regardless, so we have 1 open if we don't reelect the 4 that reapplied. So we have an open seat, and seems like we got a lot of representation from District 2 already between the 2 that already reapplied.
And quite frankly, I was looking just at the amount of work that they do and the quality of their work, not the district that they reside in.
Right, and Neil Schmidt, well, he was recommended by the committee, but I'm good to go with Commissioner McDaniel. So that would be the only change to the recommendation.
So that would be Bruce
Hamels.
All right, well, I just needed clarity because, like I said, I saw on the list that we had 6, and I didn't know.
You do have 6, but the 6th member's term is not expired yet.
Okay, because they had the same dates on my list, that's what I was wondering.
So
Stand corrected.
So then the motion would
We're only
be,
having 1 then open if we elect the other 4.
so the motion would be to appoint the 4 that are up for reappointment and appoint Bruce Hamels as the 5th vacancy.
Second.
I'll make that motion, and unless you want to, Commissioner.
Fine. Second.
Motion by Commissioner Saunders, second by Commissioner McDaniel. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right.
Commissioners, right on time. That brings us to our 9:30 time certain, item 10A. This is a recommendation to submit a community project funding application to Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart for $6 million to construct a Collier County Veteran Services Center and Museum at the previously proposed location for a Collier County Public Schools Career and Technical Training Center, adjacent to the planned Golden Gate Parkway entrance to the State Veterans Nursing Home and Adult Daycare campus. This item is brought to the agenda by Commissioner Saunders.
Commissioner Saunders.
Thank you. We've all talked about how important our veteran community is here in Collier County. I had mentioned once before that Governor DeSantis had said that he wanted to make Florida the most veteran-friendly state in the country, and I've said many times I want to make Collier County, I know the board wants to make Collier County the most veteran-friendly county in the state. And this is part of that puzzle. We have the Veterans Nursing Home with the adult day health care, and as J.B. Holmes had pointed out a few moments ago, we've got funding for that from the state. We've got the language we needed from the state. And that project is moving along very, very nicely. And I think this is just another part of that campus concept that we've been talking about, where we have all of the veterans' offices, all the veteran service offices in one location. This building that we're talking about this morning would serve a multiple purpose. It's not just a military museum. That's not even really the main function. The main function of this building would be to provide space for all of the veteran service offices here in the county in one location, so that veterans, members of the military that are here, can at one location meet with all of the people that they may need to meet with for their various needs. The upstairs portion of this building has already been designed pardon me, for offices and for meeting space, which would be perfect for that. So we can move all of our veteran services there and also provide space for other veterans organizations. One of the things that it came up was, how did this building even become part of the concept? And I guess it was probably 8 months ago, David Hines approached me and said this would be a wonderful location for a military museum. And I said, well, I can't disagree with you, but the building's already really committed to the school district. And as I advised the board a few weeks ago, the school district changed their mind, decided not to occupy that space. I contacted David Hines and said, good news, the building's available. I'm going to put this on the agenda and ask the board to consider moving forward with this concept of a Veterans Services Center and Military Museum. In addition to that, Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart happens to be a good friend. He and I served together in the Florida Senate, and I brought this subject up with him, and he thought this would be a wonderful idea as part of the campus that we're designing for our veteran community, and suggested that we do what used to be an earmark application. It's a community services type of an application for federal funding. We had estimated that the cost to reconfigure and construct this building, remodel this building, would be about $6 million. That was an estimate that was developed when the school board was looking at this building. And so the request would be this morning that the board authorize our staff to apply for a community project funding from the federal government for a military museum, but more importantly for a Veterans Service Center to be located at that location. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the request, and I know there's several people that are interested in speaking on this topic.
Public speakers.
I actually only have one registered speaker.
Let's do that.
Okay. Lois Bolin.
As she's coming up to the podium, I'd like to recognize that the members of the board of directors of the museum are in the back there, and I don't know if Mr. Hines would like to come up at some point. I think I'd like to ask him a couple questions about this as well. So, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I would like to have a couple other speakers that I'd like to ask a couple questions.
No worries at all.
Grandpa, what's for supper? That's from Hee Haw, in case you youngins don't remember that. I'm here to speak in favor of.
Your name.
What? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Lois Bolin. Dan Caldwell is my county commissioner. 5009. Do I need to give my address? I don't have to do that, right? Okay. So why am I dressed the way I'm dressed? On March the 21st is the official Rosie the Riveter Day. And we know how important Rosie the Riveter was to winning World War II. I'm here to support this because I can't tell you how excited I am that there's a possibility that we could get all the veterans' needs in one area, because it is so hard for them to travel around to all these various locations. And as importantly, I'm thrilled about the assisted living. I'm not sure if I'm saying the right name. And I'm equally excited about having the military museum there, because a lot of people over the years have given a lot of archives. And it's just a perfect storm, so to speak. It probably will be a storm. Some people aren't going to be happy about it, and why, I don't know. But if you really study the value or what role Florida played, the role that Florida played in winning World War II is tremendous. I have some books, Troy, I'm going to give to you to give to the commissioners. It's not a gift. It's from Tallahassee, so there's no worry about that. But this is so important. I mean, Collier County is rich in so many resources, and they're rich because of the World War II veterans and those that followed in their footsteps. So, Commissioner Saunders and to the rest of the commissioners, I thank you for considering this. This would be a tremendous asset for our veterans. And so, on behalf of all the Rosie Riveters and Rosebuds around the country, I want to thank you for entertaining this motion, or whatever it's called. Thank you.
Thanks, Lois.
And Mr. Chairman, David Hines, I think, wanted to ask him just a couple quick questions. Your current location, if you could describe where you are currently and what your operations are.
Yes, my name is David Hines, and I'm president of the America's Military and First Responders Museum. We are located at the North Road Terminal, excuse me, at the Naples Airport. We have had 2 rooms out there since 2011, but unfortunately, the airport did some remodeling, and after they remodeled half of the building out there, that we never got it back, and we had put approximately 5,000 World War II artifacts in storage in 2020, and they're still in storage. We had one other room, 800 square feet, which we presently have the museum now. It is packed solid, and any donations we get, which we get 2 or 3 a week, they go into storage because there's no place to put them. So when Mr. Saunders contacted me about space available, we couldn't wait to take a look at it to see. I'm thinking it's approximately 8,000 square feet from 800 square feet. We could make a museum setting instead of a display area now. Right now, we have glass cases, case after case after case, and everything on the walls and stuff that people enjoy it, but they say, you don't have a museum, you have a display area, which I totally agree with them. But we have plans on making this a first-class museum for the military and also for the first responders in Collier County.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask Mr. Mullins to come up. He's got a couple images, because I think it's important for the board to know that the county had already done some preliminary architectural and design work for the vocational education facility. And it just turns out that those plans are really almost perfect for being converted into this type of a use. And I think it'd be helpful for the board and for the public to see what this building would look like.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Saunders. For the record, John Mullinger, Director of Communications, Government and Public Affairs, and with apologies to Harvard Jolly Architects, because I'm sure this first slide is some level of architectural copyright infringement. This is kind of a redo of the facade of the Veterans Services Center and Military Museum proposal. As mentioned, This is the existing floor plan. It has not been modified at all, showing how it was supposed to be designed as a career center. The upper floor being some office space, lower floor being congregate meeting room space, plus an open air area for training and different technical pursuits. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, and just one other comment. I believe on the other end of the building, there's an elevator, so it's already accessible. So thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, if there are no other questions, my motion is simply for the board to direct staff to make application for a community project through Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart with the idea that this would serve as a Veterans Service Center and military museum.
Mr. LaCastro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just want to make a couple comments. I think, first of all, I really appreciate you showing the photos because we got, I'm sure we all did, I certainly did, got emails from people that weren't supportive of this and had all these great ideas for it, but don't even know where the building is and hadn't even seen. So turning this into affordable housing is not a efficient use of this space, and we got some of those suggestions, and that's fine. I mean, I appreciated feedback from a lot of citizens. I don't think it matters if you're a veteran or not to support this project. I like what Dave said is we don't have a museum, we have a display area, and it just got shrunk by 50% a few years ago. We talk about being a veteran-friendly, town. I've been to towns that are less veteran-friendly and have amazing veteran museums. We have no shortage of stuff on display. So, I mean, I think most people know I'm a veteran, Dan's a veteran, Dan Cowell. It doesn't really matter. This is a veteran and first responder museum, and I think it's a perfect location. It's unfortunate we lost the technical school, which would have also been a positive, but things change all the time. Just some last minute notes that I made here is the display center. It's on borrowed time. So if this isn't the location, we need to keep talking about something else. So if somebody's got a real heartburn with this location, but I sort of think forward as to once that whole footprint is finished, we do have a big affordable housing project. We have the golf project. We have the veterans nursing home. Then have a veterans museum. It just seems like we're not just plopping stuff arbitrarily, but it has some cohesion to it that I fully support. And to those people that maybe have an issue with it, well then, rather than just put up your hand and saying it's a bad idea, well then help us with another location. Somebody donate some land, somebody tell us what we're missing. But I think this is a great idea. Fully support moving forward on it. If we wind up not getting some of the money from the state or some of the other grants that we're applying for, I don't think it should kill this project. I think we should think loud and proud and figure out some other things. And then Dave, I'll challenge you in public here. Help meet us in the middle. There's a lot of people that say they love veterans, they love coming to the display area and all this. Well, we need funding from lots of different sources. So even if we get the big number, you're going to need money to move things, to take stuff out of storage, to maybe redo this inside a little bit, and there's always something that sort of falls through the cracks. So, I would say as this starts to maybe move forward, if it did, I would just challenge you, and I'd be here to help you. I know JB Holmes would help, and all the famous veterans in the office. I mean, we'll energize Wayne Smith, and you don't have to energize him. Wayne Smith's always here, right? To get the community to be a part of this with philanthropy, investment, and so it's not a matter of us just waiting for Tallahassee to write us a check. And so, I certainly, and I know all the commissioners would be, if they support this project, I would hope would be instrumental in helping to drive that and advertise it and let the community know that if this is taking shape, we need investment from all sides, not just waiting for Tallahassee to do our homework for us. But that would be a big help. So I fully support this project.
Well, we opened up at the airport in 2011, and any large donations that we've got since then has been gone into a building fund. We haven't spent any of it. So we do have money to help, and we are contacting some influential people here in Naples to make some big contributions. And I forgot to mention, even though we're in a small 800 square foot area, we have been advised by the airport that they are going to remodel the other half. So that means we pack up everything and we move it out. We presently have 3 storage hangars and 3 temperature controlled units that we are storing items in now. So if we have to close the airport, we're out of business. And that's coming this year. I can't get a definite answer when, but we're in the process of trying to clear the clutter out of the museum in preparation for this closing of the museum.
Thanks, Dan. Commissioner Collier.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd have to say probably that one of the first meetings I had when I became a commissioner last year was with your organization. And, I really believe in what you guys are doing, and you really need, somewhere, because you were telling me the horror stories of being moved around and losing square footage, and the amount of stuff you guys have in storage and what that costs you every month to just keep them in an area that they're not going to deteriorate or get damaged. And I was trying to look myself at a deputy or assistant manager was also, and I reached out to several different things, and I was thinking about the train station. I don't know if I mentioned it at one point, being a possible location, but then come to find out, I didn't even realize that we don't even own that property. The county maintains it as a museum, but we don't own it, so that would probably be a hard sell. And then I didn't even think about this project. But then I have people that approach me, and probably just like some of the other commissioners, in casual conversation in reference to affordable housing for this building after the school bowed out. But, similar to something like the Sticks project. But then at the same time, I had to, let them know that these are two different things, because Sticks is we changed some things around for Sticks and made it certain to only convert a hotel or motel deeded property and use that type of LDC, that development code for the smaller units, which I said this doesn't apply to this building because it was never a hotel or a motel. So we'd have to actually go in and change our own rules that we did just for Sticks to basically exist in the way they are now and operating. So, there's probably other spots on the property to maybe build something, but cost efficiently, in the way this building's already laid out, I would have to try to support, I would probably support this project moving forward, or at least tempting to find out if we're going to get the ability to get the money from the federal government to move forward. So,
thank you.
Commissioner McDaniel.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just how much money do you have? Do you remember?
We probably have approximately $110,000.
Okay.
And we have been approaching several influential people and making presentations to them, hoping that they will step up forward.
I think I talked to you back in the day when they cut the Veteran Services Center becoming right there. I mean, that flows with the entire facility, with the Veterans Nursing Home and what we have going on. I have reservations with regard to the draw on our community funds with regard to our museums at large. I'm going to say it out loud. It's been brought up several times. At some particular stage, we need to have a discussion about how we're managing 5 museum systems currently right now. And today is not the discussion point. We'll have that discussion when we move into our budget. I'm absolutely in favor of moving this forward and having a look-see as to the overall intention and expense and operations. Those are the things that are going to ultimately sell me with regard to how we're going to move this forward. But the advent of having a central location for veterans to don't have to travel everywhere all over the county to different locations in combination with museum, I think it's a wonderful idea and a wonderful approach.
Thanks, Commissioner McDaniel. I'm going to agree. I love this concept. Pictures. I'm a picture guy. That helps me. And so, I know that we can remodel that a lot less expensively than we could build it. So this is like a great spot. However, with regard to what Commissioner McDaniel said, the expense on the people. Whenever I wanted something, if I wanted a truck, I would purchase an asset, just say for simple reasons. I would purchase a mobile home, and I'd rent the mobile home. And the cash flow from the mobile home I would use to purchase my truck. So when the truck was paid off, I still had the mobile home, still paying income. So with that concept in mind, I've been, Commissioner Saunders, I've been notified by some people who love the idea of this building. And as it's, we're operating at 1,000 square feet now, I think there's almost 9,500 square feet in here. And I'm just going to throw this out there, but they've approached me as a place to include not only veteran services, but financial education, counseling, career development, economical development, social case management, along with veteran services. So my thoughts are, if we do this, could we lease space to these people because they have partner agencies who have committed support to their cause? Could we lease space to them that would help us with maintenance and operation?
I think there's a couple points I'd like to make. First of all, yes, there's a limited number of veteran services offices that are going to be needed, and I think that there would be space available for other types of services like financial services. I have no doubt of that. I've been in this building. I've looked at all the design work, and I'm very confident that there'd be enough room to accommodate the museum, certainly, and then all of the offices that we're talking about. But for federal funding, the emphasis has to be on this is a Veterans Services Center, but we can configure this any way we want to. So that's one point. So the answer to that question is yes. Secondly, the way we pay for our museums, we have a line item in our tourist development tax collection for operations of museums. I believe that's set at, I think, $2 million. That may be a number that may have to be adjusted at some point. I'm not sure when it was last adjusted, but that's how these museums are generally operated. They're operated out of tourist taxes as well as donations and contributions from the community. The other aspect of this is that there are artifacts in some other museums, like the one here on campus, that can be moved there. There are artifacts in the campus museum here that can be moved to other museums. And the thought is for the long-range planning, and that's not anything for today, but just for long-range planning, that site where we have our county museum is probably going to be needed for other governmental building of some sort in the long-term future. And so this will give us an opportunity to begin that process if we need to move artifacts from this museum to a different location. But all of those issues that you've raised, Mr. Chairman, can be accommodated in this building.
I don't know if this is the right time to discuss it, but since we are talking about it, there's also this is not a good spot for housing because it's less than half an acre. And you could only put, if you did want that, but there are next door to it 8.3 acres that's zoned, I think it's community facilities. And I don't know if the golf course, I don't know if Arthrex is planning on using all or a portion of that. I know that I spoke with staff this week and they said that part of that 8.3 acres is not being targeted for housing right now, but it's a good spot to talk. When I start thinking about creating cash flow or creating income for the county, instead of just giving it all away at the taxpayer's expense, maybe we could take a portion of that along Golden Gate Boulevard and look at some mixed use and with some housing. I don't know if we can talk, I don't know if this is the right time to talk about that or not, but just real briefly, just throwing it out there.
Sure, commissioners, of course. So there is that parcel you're referring to. What we're in the process of doing now with the configuration of the golf course is making sure we understand all of the stormwater needs. The Golden Gate Golf Course currently serves and will continue to serve as a flow through for a huge portion of Golden Gate City on the other side. So making sure that as we develop the Veterans Nursing Home, the already slated housing, workforce housing, as well as the configuration of the golf course, that we have adequate both dry and wet retention as well as capacity to handle the stormwater. Once that's determined, and we're getting close, then we would be able to talk about the uses on any other remaining property that isn't required for the golf course or for green space, and then absolutely appropriate conversation at that time to have about the future of that property. It was originally slated potentially to be a government services center, and I think we're really moving in a different direction, so that leaves it kind of up to the board on what they see as the future for that property.
Right, so if you could keep that in the front, not in the back of your mind, but in the front of your mind,
Of course.
that'd be great. I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And
And Mr. Hall, you stated that you like pictures. If you were contact Mr. Rodriguez, I've sent him a whole bunch of pictures of previous displays that we have had at the museum before we lost the space, and also some upcoming things. And one good example is a 95-year-old gentleman came in and donated a Nazi submachine gun. And he wanted it for tax purposes before he died. But unfortunately, we had to take it to a gunsmith and get it welded because we can't have any live weapons in there. But and things like this are very unique, and this thing's valued at $30,000. And we have a Harley-Davidson bicycle that's made into a carrier on the back of it to carry pigeons in. We have some very unique items that some of them's on display, some of them's in storage. So we feel this is a time, if you approve this, that we will make very good use out of it.
I think we're trying to.
Thanks.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? There you
Can
go.
I just add one thing? Dave, you and I have had this conversation before. If it looks like this is starting to move in a favorable direction, I'll just plant a little seed in your back pocket, which you and I have talked about before. These storage units that you have, and your exact quote to me one time is, every time somebody passes away, their spouse comes and then drops off, 80 sets of fatigues that their husband had in Vietnam. You really need to start thinning out that inventory. Like I said, do you pick the 10 best things? That's what a museum does. A museum isn't a storage house it's not a thrift shop, and you have some stuff in storage. We want to be able to see the Harley-Davidson bicycle. We want to be able to see those things that truly are historical items. But, like you were telling me, one of the hangars is filled with nothing but just old uniforms. Pick the 10 most historic ones, and, we can't save everything, because you'll even outgrow this space if it turns out that, we cut a ribbon on this. And so simultaneously, this is a good time to start doing a little bit of spring cleaning, and it means making tough choices. Maybe another museum wants some of those uniforms. Maybe some of those uniforms could be, donated to, something else, or a thrift shop that would, people would buy them or whatever. Or sometimes things just need to be disposed of that are sitting in storage and are moldy and aren't going to be used for anything. So you and I talked about that a few times, and that storage space, I think you're paying for it. Correct?
Yes.
So it's like, the money that you have is also leaking out the back door for storage of things you probably will never display, and that's not the business you want to be in. So,
as per our conversation, it's about 8 months ago, we no longer accept any uniforms unless they're from a four-star general. So we stopped taking uniforms, and we are sorting through there now.
Right.
Plus, you had mentioned, I told you, we had approximately 10,000 books. And we've been giving books away free and for donation, and we probably have given out in a year's time over probably 2,000 or 3,000 books. Perfect. And the donations has been a source of income for us, and it's been very profitable. And I thank you for that idea, because we're moving a lot of books, and we've contacted veterans organizations. Pass the word around. Anybody's interested in military history, we've got the books from Civil War to today's conflicts.
Thank you, sir.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
County Manager.
Commissioners, just going to jump back briefly to item 5A, Artist of the Month. I have the information on our Artist of the Month. Our artist, let me direct your attention to the back of the room. Our March Artist of the Month is Marina Lonis. Art enthusiasts can immerse themselves in Miss Lunis's latest collection titled Naples Beaches. Her art embodies her constant inspiration drawn from our amazing Sunshine State. She has been sharing her creations with Floridians since 2015, bringing joy to more than 300 Florida homes and private collections across the United States. In addition to her gallery, she is the proud proprietor of Naples Frame Up, the city of Naples' longest-standing custom framing establishment. Both the gallery and her store are located on 10th Street North. With that, we have enough time, if it pleases the board. Let's take our 2 advertised public hearings that move from the summary agenda. We can get a court reporter break, provided that goes along, and then we can go to our 10:30 time certain. So that would be items 17A and 17B, now items 9A and 9B. These items do require the commission members to provide ex parte disclosure, and we will require all participants to be sworn in. This is a recommendation to approve a rezoning ordinance for the NBC RV mixed-use planned unit development, a portion of which remains in the rural fringe mixed-use district receiving lands zoning overlay, to allow 356,000 square feet of commercial and industrial uses and 75 travel trailer recreational vehicle campground units on property located 450 plus minus feet northwest of the intersection of Basic Drive and Tamiami Trail East, 5 miles east of Collier Boulevard in Section 18, Township 51 South, Range 27 East, Collier County, Florida, consisting of 34 plus minus acres. And its companion item is a recommendation to approve an ordinance amending the future land use element and future land use map series of the growth management plan to create the East Tamiami Trail mixed-use subdistrict to allow up to 356,000 square feet of gross floor area of heavy commercial and industrial uses and up to 75 travel trailer recreational vehicle campground units. Also, let me just read into the record, and I'm sure Mr. Davies will cover this, but we do have an adjustment to Attachment A, the revised ordinance, Exhibit F, under Hours of Operation, which is Item 6. The following language should be added. Every 5 years from the date of adoption of the ordinance, staff will provide a report to the Collier County Board of County Commissioners on the hours of operation for loading and crushing of concrete, the impacts to owners, and whether any complaints have been made to the county. Upon finding of public purpose, the board reserves the right to modify the hours of operation to 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. at such meeting without an advertised hearing. With that, we need to have participants stand up to be sworn in by the court reporter.
I do.
And before we get started, ex parte from the commissioners.
Ex parte on 9A and 9B, Commissioner McDaniel.
Yes, I do have emails on this subject matter.
Commissioner LaCastro.
I've had emails and meetings.
I have no ex parte. Commissioner Saunders.
I had some emails on this.
Commissioner Caldwell.
I have no ex partes.
All right, great.
All right, with that, we'll turn it over to the applicant's attorney, Mr. Davies.
Commissioner LaCastro may have.
Yeah, Mr. Davis, let me just make a couple of opening comments. I pull things frequently off of the consent and summary agenda for different reasons. Sometimes because I'm like, hey, this thing needs to be talked about, and I don't want it to, consent and summary, one vote approves 50 things, and then, we often hear from citizens who read a couple of sentences and think we sort of snuck it in type of thing. And I thought this was worthy of discussion. I want to make sure that you're at the podium here. You're going to separate rumor from fact. Jamie Cook and I spoke about this one quite a bit. When I see the term rock crushing lot in here, it's like, okay, I start to cringe, right? We just solved that. Now we're creating another one. But to separate rumor from fact, the one on Santa Barbara and Davis was in a very visible spot. And I've told citizens before when they were up in arms over a rock crushing lot on Santa Barbara and Davis, rock's being crushed all over the county. You just don't see it because sometimes it's, knee deep, off of the main road and it's being done for a reason. I want to hate this one a lot less. That's why I pulled it. I have a lot of concerns about how something like this on the surface could get approved today and sound just fine. But it can take a really nasty turn where, as Ms. Cook and I were talking about, you approve something and then, when nobody's looking, it starts to morph into something else. And then all of a sudden, to try to pull it back becomes very, very difficult. So there's a lot of things being requested in here. And I just thought it being sort of not hidden, but just being on the summary agenda wasn't something that, and it looked like maybe my colleagues agreed. I don't know if it was just me that pulled it. I can't remember. But certainly I want to do a deeper dive. And I expect that's why you're here. And then, I invite county staff to also come up and explain what we're approving, what we're not approving, and why we really should approve it or not, or make any changes. So that's why I pulled it, because it was a more complicated type thing than just a thumbs up, thumbs down, which normally the summary agenda and consent agendas usually are those type of things, paying bills, changing an ordinance of something that's favorable to everyone. This one's got a lot of moving parts, and it's in my district, anyway, so I look forward to hearing your presentation.
Absolutely, and certainly appreciate that, Commissioner LaCastro. Good morning, Commissioners. Noel Davies with the law firm of Davies Duke. On behalf of the applicant, we do have the full presentation ready today. Commissioner Locastro and the board. I'm going to run through that. My client representatives are here as well as the full team, so look forward to answering your questions and to your point, Commissioner Locastro, giving this project the deep dive that you're requesting, and we're happy to do that today, so thank you for the opportunity. Keith Basic and Jeff Basic are here this morning, my client representatives. Bob Mulhair and Ellen Summers from Bowman are the professional planners on this project. And Norman Trebilcock is also here today with Trebilcock Consulting Solutions. Mr. Trebilcock is our transportation engineer. Project site is located approximately 5 miles east of the intersection of Collier Boulevard and the East Trail. Our pending applications include a rezone to PUD with the corresponding growth management plan amendment. Property size is approximately 33.5 acres. We are proposing approximately 356,000 square feet of commercial and industrial uses, as well as 75 travel trailer recreational vehicle spaces. We are currently zoned as 3 conventional zoning districts today: I, or industrial zoning district, ag, agricultural zoning district, and TTRVC, which is travel trailer recreational vehicle zoning district. Our proposed PUD has 3 tracts. You'll see the master plan on your screen. Tract I is the industrial tract. Tract C is our commercial tract. And tract TC is an either-or tract. We would have the option to put either more commercial there or to do the TTRVC uses. We've shifted the industrial uses as far north as possible. Our industrial uses are immediately adjacent on the west to other existing industrial uses. For example, there is a concrete batch plant right next door. I can assure you, to your points, Commissioner Locastro, this is the appropriate area in the county for a project like this. We have worked closely with our neighbors throughout the process. We've had 2 neighborhood information meetings, and we have agreed to provide our neighbors with a 10-foot high concrete wall all along the eastern perimeter of the property. That's going to extend well over 2,000 linear feet. This is way beyond what your code requires, which is only a 6-foot high fence or berm. We've limited our industrial uses as well as our commercial uses. We've eliminated a number of industrial uses that we are allowed by right today based on the industrial zoning. We also picked only a small section of the C5 uses in your code, 28 of the 183 C5 uses. I do want to point out what we're not doing as much as what we are requesting today. We do have a small concrete crushing use, but we are not doing, to your point, Commissioner Locastro, the type of crushing that occurred on the Davis and Santa Barbara site. I do want to be very clear about that and how we are different. We are proposing a very limited and heavily conditioned crushing operation, which we are allowed to do by right today based on the industrial zoning, but it's going to be limited to the 3.5 acres on the very north end of our property. And we have agreed to a number of conditions, both from staff and from the Planning Commission, including the use of state-of-the-art water spray systems and dust control, as well as an agreement to come back every 5 years to have the board reassess our hours of operation, which we are more than happy to do. That is the condition that County Manager Patterson referenced at the opening.
Mr. Davies?
Yes, sir.
Ask you a quick question. The difference in the rock crushing, it's still a commercial operation that will bring in rock from other companies. It has nothing to do with this site, and this is just going to be a sort of a clearinghouse, sort of a ground zero, if you will, for other companies to have their rock crushed, correct?
That's correct. Essentially, the concrete aggregate comes to this site, and it's crushed, it's reduced in size to some other form.
Yeah, I know.
Like
Oh,
57.
trust me, everybody up here is very familiar with how to crush
Yes,
rock.
sir. Yes, sir.
My concern with the Santa Barbara Davis lot, all of our concerns was rock comes in faster than it's being crushed. So you have small operations and you're like, oh, it's going to be a small, it's minimal machinery. It's not going to be as loud. We've had NIMS. Everybody's sort of happy with it. But then, as we hear and I'm just looking into the future of what possibly could go wrong. You have, a huge operation somewhere in Fort Myers that was torn down. All those tractor trailers with the concrete come to the site, and it takes a year and a half to crush all that rock. I mean that's the problem we had on Santa Barbara and Davis, and even though it was a visible spot, so it made it worse. Having this be a huge giant, or it could turn into that operation. So I just, I'd like assurances that it's not that, and we'll get to it, but I think every 5 years is not frequent enough, but we'll get to that part as well. I think we should reserve the right to analyze something. If something comes to my attention 6 months into this, I should be able to raise it and say, time out, this thing's not going the way it should. So I don't know, the 5 years part sounds like a nice little line item, but I think as commissioners, we can raise anything at any time, I would hope. But we'll get to that, and I'll get clarification from the county manager. But those are some of my concerns as you're starting to explain, hey, this is totally different. That's what the last guy said on Santa Barbara and Davis, and then of course it got out of control. So I want to hear more assurances. So, right, Commissioner McDaniel, so I hate it less, maybe?
I don't know if you will or not, sir.
Yeah. I mean, I know by right you're allowed to do these things, and that's why I wanted you at the podium. So, maybe citizens that don't love this realize that there's only so much we can do as commissioners, when it comes to property rights and the law. But we also can make sure that, we're not just, rubber stamping something and then, we're here 6 months from now and it's some big giant headache that we can't pull back.
Absolutely. And if I may, let me make those assurances now and answer any additional questions. Like I mentioned, this is limited to the 3.5 acres on the north end of the site, okay? I think it's 16 or more acres that you were dealing with at the Davis and Santa Barbara site, right? Everyone knows how large that was. This is a portion of the site at the northern end, okay? North of the East Trail. It's one item. And so Commissioner, I mean, this is something that we've worked closely with your staff on to try to make sure that all the proper mitigations are in place. The most important one in my mind, well, two really. One is that we're building a 10-foot wall, okay? So the eastern perimeter of the property, this is slated to the north and west side of our project site. The eastern property has estates lots, and we've agreed to build a 10-foot high concrete wall to prevent adverse impacts on those property owners. We've also worked with staff on having water systems. A water system is going to be running anytime this crusher is going to be in use, and that's a requirement condition.
How about noise? And pardon me, Mr. Chairman, I don't mean to be chiming in, and this will be my last thing.
Let him finish.
But the wall doesn't project, so it's an aesthetic. So I'll just.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long way away to actually get to those homes, so it's been spaced appropriately. And my understanding is that the technology of this machine is not significantly loud, especially with the water consistently running, and then the hours of operation limitations that we've made as well.
Can I ask one quick question? Put the aerial back up, or the map back up,
Yes,
please.
sir.
That's the site that's what I'm wanting to see right there.
Mm-hmm.
And do we already own the auto recycling plant that's there? There's a auto recycling facility up in that area?
That's not my client, no, sir.
Okay.
I think that's one of the industrial uses that immediately abuts the site,
Sure.
owned by a different group.
Thank you.
So happy to answer additional questions about the crushing use or about any other elements of this project. Your staff is recommending approval. We did have our hearing with the Planning Commission. It was a unanimous recommendation of approval from Planning Commission. There were no public speakers at the Planning Commission hearing. And with that, we request your vote of approval today, but as I mentioned, the full team is here to answer your questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioners.
Mr. Kowal.
Thank you, Chairman. I know we keep talking about the crusher and crusher noise, but I think what we experience is a lot is not so much the crushers, it's the dump trucks. When they're dumping the bulk material and the tailgates are banging and the loud noise of the large rocks coming out of the metal dump trucks. And that has a tendency to be the loudest part of this process. But this 10-foot wall just entertain me here. Is it a solid wall, or what kind of material is it made out of?
Concrete wall.
So it's a concrete wall. Yes, all right, so it'll still have some sound barrier to it.
Over 2,000 linear feet, the entire eastern perimeter.
And I look at that aerial, I mean, I don't see any really residential homes within eyeshot of the aerial.
These large lots here, Commissioner, on the eastern perimeter, between what you see as marked as a subject.
Yeah, the eastern side to the place, yeah.
So there's a bunch of existing industrial to the west side of us, to the east side of those large ranch-style lots.
Okay, so the site you're talking about is going to be the northeastern corner of that.
Northwestern is where the 3.5 acres is of this blue.
That arrow that says subject site.
Top left corner.
Subject site.
Right.
So this is next to the
Right there.
concrete plant, the CMEX plant?
Yes.
I thought the CMEX plant's set to the east of 41.
North of the East Trail, west of us.
All right, I understand what you're saying.
Right in here, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it right there. So your furthest part, where it says subject site, that would be east of the trail?
Yeah, so the subject site's everything in blue?
Yeah.
Okay, the full 33.5 acres.
Would be the northeast corner of your
Proposed
property.
crushing uses in here. And these are the other industrial uses all on the western side.
Yeah. Thank you.
The wall extends along the full eastern perimeter.
Thank you.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, two things. I share Commissioner LaCastro's concern about a 5-year review. I'd be happy with shortening that up on an annual, or minimally to an annual basis. And then certainly the board can pull anything if it becomes substantive. One of the things to be aware of, we need to be aware of, is those that look like farm fields today are not going to be farm fields forever. That is Lippman Farms. That's part of the Rural Friends Mixed Use District. That's developable land that is in fact coming forward. There's a structure that's being built. They call it the northeast structure with regard to outfall from the Picayune State Forest with water. So what is there today isn't going to be that way forever. It's not a remote location. Number two, I concur with Commissioner Kowal with regard to the dump trucks and the in-haul of the aggregate. Stockpiling does in fact become an issue. Is there a limitation, and maybe our staff can tell us this when they're coming forward, is there a limitation on the height of the stockpiling that can become a 10-foot wall is nice. I know it's above our code, but when you have a exceptionally high piece of or stockpile, then you have equipment going up on it and everything else.
Yeah, it's not our intent, Commissioner, to have a high stockpiling. I'm not sure what the current regulations are or requirements on that. Certainly will abide by the governing regulations on that.
Okay, let's find out what those are, please. Intent's all that in a bowl of cherries, but I want to make sure that we're not walking into a trap here that we ran into. And again, Commissioner LaCastro spoke a lot about a development or a project that became out of hand. But I want to know what those limitations in fact are.
Thank you, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Jamie French. I'm your Department Head for Growth Management and Community Development. There is no limitation on the height of this location. And the reason why we had that conversation with Mr. Davies was exactly what you and Commissioner Colwell said with regards to that property is going to develop. And we felt like 5 years out, even though our crystal ball is more like a magic 8 ball with this market, we don't know when it's going to develop. We just know that it is part of our RLSA and trying to read the community.
Rural fringe.
Noise. I'm sorry, the rural fringe mixed use district. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Commissioner LaCastro.
Thank you, Chairman. The other thing we haven't talked about, and Mr. French or either Ms. Cook can comment on it. So it's great. It's in the far northwest corner. You know, it's away from all these houses, or away from houses now, as Commissioner McDaniel says, and that's going to change. But the other thing we haven't talked about is traffic. So those trucks have to go down Tamiami Trail, and then they disappear into the woods and crush rock, and nobody hears it, and there's no houses there. But this is the same issue we've had in other places where to get there, they're going down a very busy road right now that has a lot of other things already on it. And, I just don't want to, I know there's no assurances, but they have to get to the site. And, a long line of trucks filled with, construction debris that are headed to this site is of great concern to me. It's not like they're taking back roads or they're sort of sneaking their way into lot. They're going down a main thoroughfare that has a lot of traffic, we've had a lot of safety issues and accidents and things there. We've been working with FDOT to get stoplights in really critical locations to maybe help the traffic and the safety. So Ms. Cook, what can you tell us about it's a much smaller footprint, as Mr. Davies said, than what we had at Santa Barbara and Davis. But still, those big semis that Commissioner Colwell talked about, before they start banging their lids all the way in the back north corner that nobody's maybe going to hear, they still have to get there. And that's adding a lot of stuff to the road of an industrial, nature that, I just like some assurances that it's not going to be the Indy 500 there every day as, these trucks make their way to this site.
Jamie Cook, Director of Development Review. Thank you, Commissioner. As this would be a legal operation should the PUD and GMP amendments be approved, the next step for them would be a site development plan, and as part of that process, they will have to submit a traffic impact statement to our office for review, which would include the types of vehicles. It would look at an analysis of both the roadway, basic drive, as well as Tamiami Trail, and then if any coordination is needed with FDOT, that would be required prior to them even being able to begin the operation. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And they have that by right now, is that correct?
Their current designation is industrial, but in, I believe it's 2021, the board did restrict the rock crushing aspect from an industrial to not being a permitted use, but requires approval from the Board of County Commissioners.
So they have to have the approval now to rock crush. They don't have that by right as it exists today, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner McDaniel.
I have two points. Number one, Ms. Cook, you want to come on back? And that has to do with water quality. Does the water quality testing and monitoring come in after the approval and during their SDP process?
Yes, they will have to go through permitting both with the county and the Water Management District as well.
And the other thing I want to bring up to my colleagues, there are a multitude of factors that have to do with the in-haul of aggregate from construction debris. There's an excessive fee, a very, very high fee that's currently being charged by our receiver at the landfill with regard to construction debris. And I know that precipitated a lot of debris coming to that site at Davis and Santa Barbara. The disparity, it was close to $1,000 a load just to dump construction debris at our landfill facility. And that operator that was at Santa Barbara and Davis, he was at 200 and then he went to 400 and still couldn't bring it in quick enough. So that brings me back to, and this may be a question for the operators. I understand what it is that you're going through. Height limitations with regard to the stockpiling. This is a constrained site. Do we have an opportunity to reduce that stockpiling so that it is kept, we keep that obstacle above the 10-foot wall?
Commissioner, I would believe that that would be part of the PUD if the commission wished to make that. The code doesn't have a height restriction. It has slope requirements currently. So as long as they can meet the slope requirements within the LDC, currently they can go as high as they want. But if you wanted to put a height restriction on, you would be free to do so as part of this approval process.
Do they have a capacity to store elsewhere on the site until the crushing actually transpires?
I'll leave that to the applicant to answer that question.
Okay.
One more time, please, Commissioner.
I forgot what I asked. You got to be paying attention. No, I'm joking. The question I had is the height limitation with regard to stockpiling. Do they have the capacity to store elsewhere on the site in order to keep the limitation, to keep the height down?
As far as the storage?
Yes.
Stockpile, I believe so, yeah, within that 3.5 acres. It's designated for this use.
But the entire site's 33.5 acres. Do they have the capacity to store elsewhere on the 33.5 acres in order to keep the height down? Again, we ran into an issue with excessively high. It was represented to be considerably higher than it really was, but a 20-foot stockpile is 10 foot above the wall.
Understood. My client's confirming that there's additional space on the 33.5 acres for that.
Can we be happy with the limit? Can we get happy with the limitation on the height of the stockpiles?
As far as the height, Commissioner?
Yes.
I think the question is, are we willing to limit the language in the PUD to some sort of height for the stockpiling of the concrete? Is that correct?
That's a proper way of saying, can you be happy with the height of the stockpiles?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
if I could just have a moment with my client.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Watch them all go into auto.
We'd be agreeable to a 40-foot height limitation.
Well, that doesn't say much for your 10-foot wall.
If you look at the distance, there's 150 feet.
I guess for the record, Bob Mulhare.
Hey, Bob.
I just want to point out a couple of things. If we don't allow this somewhere, we're going to be seeing all those trucks from Collier County going up to Lee County and driving on roads throughout Collier County to get to Lee County to do this crushing. This is an appropriate location. It's already got industrial zoning. We do have an SDP approved to allow this. And I understand your concern. I don't think you'll be able to see a 40-foot stockpile with a 10-foot wall from those residents. You're going to be looking up over a 10-foot wall. You are not going to see that. If you're standing in your backyard looking up over a 10-foot wall, you won't see that. So I think with sufficient room to stockpile, I don't think the intent is to have these huge stockpiles, but I understand that could be an unintended consequence. But if we go for a board review, if something happens that isn't right, you can have an opportunity to address that. I think we'll run this responsibly. We won't have that issue, but if you do have that issue, we're agreeing to a review by the board, albeit when talking to the staff, we had said 5 years, and I understand there's probably a majority opinion that should be sooner than maybe more like every year. So.
Commissioner LaCastro.
Sometimes when we pull stuff off of consent or summary, then, we wind up sitting here and over analyzing it and it becoming a more complicated discussion than it needs to be. But in this case, I think this one needs to be a complicated discussion. From everything I'm hearing now, I don't support this the way it's written, and so I'm not saying I wouldn't be supportive of it, but I think because we've raised so many changes and you all have had a huddle, once or twice, and I'm not comfortable approving this thing on the fly. So my question to you is there some sort of time-sensitive thing? My motion off the top of my head would be, come back to the next commissioner meeting, and I'd like to see something much more detailed that didn't just have you saying, yes, after you huddled, and yeah, we can kind of do it, and yeah, a 40-foot, pile really can't be seen from, houses. I mean, I like to vote on something that's already in writing and a sure thing, not a bunch of, yeah, we can do that, we can do this, we can do that, and, unless there's some sort of gigantic time-sensitive issue here, which sometimes too, that doesn't matter to me. I mean, I want to be confident and happy and concise with my vote. Right now, I wouldn't be. I think this, I'd like to hear much more analysis from the county staff and see much more detail in the plan presented to us before it would get my vote. Doesn't mean, I get all the positives, and, Mr. Mulhare saying, trucks are going to be going somewhere and they're going to be headed north. And to Commissioner McDaniel's point, we all hated the rock crushing lot at Santa Barbara and Davis, but the reality is all that stuff would have ended up in our landfill. But on the flip side, they would have paid for it, and so there was some pluses and minuses, there as well. But I don't like doing these things on the fly. This is bigger than a bread box. This is a major thing in a major area. Yeah, it's tucked way back, but to get there and some of the other issues that we're raising, I would just like to see those things in writing, not just sort of agree to them verbally and move forward. Is my initial thought, and it's a strong one.
And if I may respond, Mr. Chair. My client would be agreeable to continue this matter to your next meeting or to a meeting that you have availability per your county manager, and we will do that. We will work with your staff. We will also huddle with our team and provide you that additional detail.
That would be my request, and maybe even my motion if I would, or maybe it's not required if you're agreeing to come back. And Mr. Davies, it's not that we don't sort of get it, but Commissioner Hall likes pictures. I like pictures, and I think we both like stuff in writing, because that is what comes back to bite us. So give us the assurances, and we might be jumping ahead. I think, if I brought Mr. Bosey or Ms. Cook to the podium, they'd reiterate that, those discussions would happen. They're not, this isn't approved. It still has to go through, several other vetting things. But for something this sensitive, I'd like to see all that stuff happen ahead of time to give me confidence that I'm voting for something to move forward that has that has the most detail possible. And I think you're going to be, sounds like you're agreeable to a lot of the things that we're proposing here off the fly, but I'd rather do it in a much more cohesive way at a future meeting, unless there's some sort of big time sensitive issue. And even if there is, an emergency on your part doesn't constitute an emergency on my part. So, but it sounds like there isn't one. So if you're agreeable to bringing it back to a future meeting, I would ask my colleagues to support that so that we can flesh this one out a little bit more. And between that time also, you can meet with us in more detail. I don't think a lot of us have had deep discussion, over this yet. We're about to vote on it, and I'm not comfortable doing so, even though I have had some discussions, over it.
Understood, agreed, and we'll absolutely do that. Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Saunders?
Thank you. I've raised some issues in the past about projects in a particular district with the district commissioner raising concerns, and I think it's important that since the District 1 commissioner has raised an issue on this, that we do continue it. So I support that. But I think it's also a good message in other projects that come forward that the district commissioner generally has a good handle on what the negative impacts, positive impacts are of projects. So I support Commissioner LaCastro in his request to continue this so we get a little bit more information.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. McDaniel?
Well, and I'll support the continuance, but I offer a suggestion, and this development, this request isn't willy-nilly. It was on our summary agenda. It did go through the Planning Commission. It did go through the DSAC. It did go through all of our normal processes. And short of the height restriction on the on the stockpiling and the adjustment for time, I don't see an enormous, so my thought was, and this was, if you want to continue it, I'm good with that. But my thought was, let's shorten the time frame up from 5 to 1 and limit the stockpiles to 40 and allow this to pass on through, because it's already, in my personal opinion, I reviewed it. I was basically, I saw that you had already pulled it by the time staff came to me, so I knew we were going to have a discussion about it. But I reviewed everything that was there, and if we made those 2 modifications, I think this request could go forward. But I'll stand with you if you want to push it. I'm fine with that too.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment on that. Respect all of that, but I will also add a lot of things have gone through the review of the county over the years, and it's gotten unanimous approval. And then, we sat here 6 months later with 70 citizens here that were up in arms that it grew out of proportion. So, to me, just because it's been vetted up to this point, or it got unanimous approval from the Planning Commission, doesn't rubber stamp it for me. And I don't think we lose anything by you doing a little bit of a deeper dive and bringing us back more detail, so that we're not doing something on the fly. I agree. Yeah, maybe there's just 2 other things, but me personally, I want the ability to talk about this one a bit more. Yeah, I saw it on the summary agenda, and I, got your voicemail, and I, looked at all the attachments and whatnot, and I just feel like we're debating it here, and it's still something that I think should be continued. And I'll just end it by saying, I'm not trying to kick the can or stall this one, but in the end, once it's approved, it's there. Once you build the pyramids, they're there for thousands of years. And I'm not saying that this thing is overly complicated, but I want to know for sure that it's not. And I want to see pictures and words that are a lot more detailed than what I'm seeing now.
Absolutely. We will do that. Thank you, sir.
I think I don't think we're opposed to the project, but we had healthy conversation today, just to address those few issues. You were just kind of a victim of the scab being a little soft from the big one. So we'll look forward to discussion when you come back.
Commissioners, before you vote, County Attorney, if we continue this date specific to the first meeting in April, does that work, or does it have to be re-advertised?
No, that works, especially that the clerk has instituted her own system now, which is far better than the Naples Daily News.
Does the first meeting in April work for the applicant? Because the next agenda is heavy with already scheduled land use.
Absolutely. For me,
Works.
Yeah, works for us.
So we'll schedule upon your vote, we'll schedule this for date certain on the first meeting in April 9th, pending your vote.
That's fine.
So you want to move to postpone it to April 1st?
So, I don't know if we need a motion, but I would make a motion that we postpone it to the first meeting in April. And I really appreciate all the hard work and due diligence, not only of Mr. Davies and his staff, but our staff. And as Commissioner Hall said, nobody's up here shooting something down, but we want to feel a lot better about it and not sort of feel like we're doing a few things on the fly. There might be even a few other things we're missing. So I think we'll all feel, better about it. So I appreciate your willingness to come back in April and work this with a little bit of a deeper look.
Absolutely.
Before we approve. So that would be my motion.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Motion and second to move it to April 1st. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, with that, we'll see you April 1st, and this is a good time for a court reporter break.
Yes, sir.
Thank you,
Just
Mr. Chair.
to be advised, we do have 50 speakers on the next item.
Over 50 now.
Oh, I'm sorry, over 50 now, and we do have our time certain items coming up in the afternoon. So we just think about where we're going to take the lunch where it makes sense, but definitely court reporter break now.
All right. Why don't we, Jamie, is 7 or 8 minutes good enough for you, or you need longer than that? How about we could just come back at 10 till 11, 10:50.
Mr. Chair, you have a live mic.
All right, we have a pretty passionate subject to talk about this morning. And got a lot of speakers to speak. You know, we've got the emails, and I think that there could be some miscommunication, and I want to clear that up right now. As we get started, everybody in the room is compassionate about Conservation Collier, including us. A lot of you don't like what we did as a board with the budget money. And that's not what we're talking about today. We've always had control to do what's the best interest of the county with the Conservation Collier funds. We've always had the ability to levy up to the 2.5 mills. It's not a 2.5 mill only thing. It's up to, of which we've always funded that much. We've always collected that much. Each person has 3 minutes. We have 50-something speakers. And the 17th time that we've here, I voted overwhelmingly for Conservation Collier. You're going to lose us. We know that. 70% of the people overwhelmingly voted this program in. That's why it's in effect. So if someone is saying the same thing that you want to say, please be respectful of us. We get it. The 19th time we hear it's not going to change our mind, or it's not going to convince us. Actually, you can take that time and talk us out of anything. We do have interest in hearing what you have to say. We're here to talk about a change of ordinance this morning to make this program function better, to take the limiting factors out of the ability to purchase property for the program. We want to streamline that. That's what we're here to talk about. So with that, we're going to welcome your comments. Please be respectful. If you're opposing this, I do not want to hear boo or a comment or anything like that. If you're in favor of it, I don't want to hear your yeah or way to go or your clap. This is a professional meeting. Respect everybody's time and ours, please. With that, Ms. Cook.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jamie Cook again for the record, Director of Development Review. So in the fall, you had request staff. Troy, assistance, please. It's not moving. Okay. In the fall, you had directed staff to come back and look at the ordinance mostly to expedite the acquisition process. In January, we presented some recommendations to you for consideration and also asked for your feedback. And since that time, there's been some additional considerations both by staff and by the county attorney's office that have been included into the revised language changes. That revised language was presented to the CLAC last week at their monthly meeting. And today we are presenting those to you with a request to advertise these changes for formal adoption at your next board meeting. So the major ordinance changes, and some of these were previously discussed, but again, as we made some changes, I wanted to go back through them and make sure that you had full visibility on what staff was requesting to be changed. Were the funding of the Conservation Collier program, the properties that are eligible for acquisition and maintenance, the nomination proposal process, as well as procedures for selection and purchase. And again, these are the major changes. There's some minor tweaks in there, but we won't cover those because there's not too much issue with those. So the first section that staff is proposing to amend is the funding of the Conservation Collier program. And with this change, the board would be codifying that each year through fiscal year 31, which is when the program is currently scheduled to sunset, that the board will set the millage rate for the Conservation Collier program not to exceed the 0.25 mils, and set the percentage split between both the acquisition and the maintenance fund for each fiscal year. The reason that staff is requesting this change, previously it was 75% to acquisition, 25% to maintenance. But as we've seen over the years, the cost of maintenance operations have increased. or fluctuated even. The changes in interest rates that maintenance fund is accruing have changed over time. So we feel that it's best to have a conversation with you each year at the budget, talk about what those interest rates are, talk about what those maintenance needs are, and adjust the funds as needed for the upcoming year. Traditionally, with the maintenance fund, the interest that is received from the fund is what has paid for all of the maintenance activities. And so we haven't had to burn into the principal of the fund. And staff, again, would like to keep having those conversations with you so that what we are paying for maintenance and management activities each year is being drawn from the interest, not the principal. Properties eligible for acquisition and maintenance. One of the things that you had directed us to do was look at alternative ways to acquire properties, both through the TDR program in the Rural Fringe Mixed Use District, as well as conservation easements. And as I mentioned to you in January, staff did have some concerns with how a conservation easement program would work. So we did come up with some suggestions of language that staff would recommend incorporating. Again, the property will retain the development rights, so if a landowner wishes to put a portion of their property into a conservation easement to Conservation Collier, they would still have the right to develop on the other portion of their property that they are not proposing for the easement. But that the easement would be maintained by the property owner. Similar to other conservation easements all over Collier County, they are dedicated to the county, but without responsibility for maintenance. We don't maintain them, so they are not coming out of Conservation Collier funds or general fund monies to maintain conservation easements. And the third part is that the conservation easement shall not be vacated nor receive an easement use agreement. If we're buying property, we wouldn't want to see it vacated. But additionally, the county has a process that if a structure needs to be built for whatever reason or was built mistakenly into a drainage easement or right-of-way easement, the county has an easement use agreement process that can, depending on the structure, can either be approved administratively or by yourselves to allow that structure to remain in the easement, given that if the county ever needed to go in and remove it for any reason, we would have the right to do so. We would not want to see structures being built in the preserves that don't already meet structures that are allowed by code, to include like viewing platforms, walkways, open air shelters, things like that are already allowed in preserves. As far as the TDR program in the Rural Fringe Mixed Use District, the purchasing policy that currently exists already allows for owners to sell their TDR credits prior to conveying the property or selling the property to Conservation Collier. So staff would recommend that that policy just be retained and followed, that if a property owner wanted to take their TDRs and be able to sell them, they would already be able to do so. The next policy that was added in this section was that the board may sell Conservation Collier lands provided that the proceeds of the sale are put back into the Conservation Collier program and can be used for additional purchases of land or maintenance activities. Staff doesn't have an opinion on this additional language either way because there was already language in the ordinance that would allow for this. So this is, I think, just making it more explicitly clear that it's already an allowed activity by the board. In the nomination of acquisition proposals section of the ordinance, staff is, in an effort to expedite the acquisition process and review by the board, staff would like to basically not have the very large cycles that we had before where you were looking at 20 or 30 properties and trying to evaluate which ones you would want staff to acquire. So we'd like to bring these to you as the applications are received. We may get 2 or 3 a month, we may get 5 or 6 a month, but that would speed up the acquisition process rather than waiting 5 or 6 months to have a full list. Staff also updated the criteria for property selection to include some critical habitats of lands in Collier County that staff is looking to acquire, as well as properties that are larger than 20 acres and properties that are within the target protection mailing areas that you approve as part of those cycles each year. Properties that would meet, because we are changing some of the criteria, we're adding several criteria. So we are recommending that the procedures for selection be updated, that instead of meeting 2 of the criteria, it would meet 3 of the criteria, and to be considered by the CLAC for review and potentially being forwarded to you for consideration. And that 6 out of the 9 criteria, if a property met 6 out of the 9 criteria, it would forego the Conservation Collier Land Acquisition Advisory Committee and come straight to you for consideration to expedite the review. Now, CLAC, both during their January meeting as well as the March meeting, did not support this language because they felt that by going to CLAC, it provided greater transparency, as well as greater public input. Residents would have the opportunity to speak on the parcel, and if there were any other considerations or concerns about the property, those could be discussed at CLAC rather than in front of you. The next one is the procedures for selection and purchase. Currently, the way the program operates is that once you have approved for staff to move forward with appraisals and looking to acquire a property, the purchase agreement, after we've gone through the appraisal process and we've made an offer, if it's accepted, it currently goes to CLAC and then to you for final approval. So staff is recommending that we bypass that CLAC for the purchase agreements once that they have been approved by the property owner and it comes straight to you. CLAC did not have any concerns with this change. Some additional CLAC recommendations were to add in perpetuity to the definition of management in the definition section. They also requested that any voting of funding percentages, allocating of money, or extension of the program only be approved by a supermajority vote. Staff didn't support this because we felt that it would make anything in the program more difficult. And the third thing that they asked was for if properties were to be considered to be sold, that a list of criteria for how a property could be considered or some type of threshold that had to be met for a property to be considered for sale. Next, that if funds were transferred from one of the accounts, they requested that language be added that those funds would be repaid. And finally, to remove stewardship sending areas within the RLSA program from the list of properties that would not be considered for acquisition. For those of you who may be slightly unfamiliar with the RLSA program, developers establish their development through stewardship receiving areas and set aside lands in stewardship sending areas, or SSAs, to help entitle that development. As part of the state and federal permitting, some of these SSAs are used as mitigation areas and have some legal management obligations through their easement agreements. And so staff would not recommend acquiring SSA lands unless funding for those legal management obligations was provided to ensure that we can meet those obligations. Additionally, the premise of the RLSA program is that environmentally sensitive areas are set aside at no cost to the taxpayer in order to entitle development within that area. So staff wouldn't recommend including this because that is the premise of the program. So with that, staff is asking you to request any feedback from you to address any concerns you may have beyond what was presented today, and approve us moving forward with advertising the ordinance to bring back at your next meeting. And with that, I'll take any questions.
I have a question for Commissioner McDaniel, just to get me clarified, because I know that you're well versed in this. So to remove stewardship sending areas for properties that would not be considered for acquisition, what does that mean in Texican?
It means we don't need to buy it twice. The lands have already been set aside in perpetuity. The development rights have been stripped off and converted to credits that can be utilized in other less environmentally sensitive areas. It's important to hear less environmentally sensitive at no expense to the public treasury, either in acquisition and or perpetual maintenance. So there's no reason for Conservation Collier to give consideration to an acquisition necessarily, unless there's sufficient, and we have some discussion points that we're going to talk about, unless there's sufficient funding set aside or contributed with that acquisition for that ongoing maintenance, perpetual maintenance.
So we would be purchasing something that's already accomplished what we would be doing in the purchasing.
That's correct.
Okay, that clears it up for me.
There may be, now, on that note, there may be, I'm not totally sure that not considering it at all, because there may be a piece of property that's within the RLSA that is critical to flowways, retention, water quality, so on and so forth, that we need to give consideration to the acquisition thereof, as long as it comes with sufficient revenues to support its maintenance aspect.
Mr. Kowal.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is for staff. I was looking at the section where we were talking about the 6 out of 9, because we did 9 line items. If they meet the 6, we're kind of foregoing the CLAC, and it's coming right to us to kind of streamline the process of going. I guess my question was, and I just questioned earlier with staff, we take in consideration the weight of that particular line item, the weighting of it, because this particular, like, say, one line item is a targeted melling area. That's a sensitive area that, you know, we're trying to target because of the reason, you know, reasoning why is because it's sensitive area, and we may fill a hole in the donut. But if it's not one of the 6, doesn't that carry a lot more weight than just having 6 out of 9? Are we weighting each requirement to, like, it should include this one plus 5 more? Or that's what I'm trying to get at, is how do we distinguish, you know, just pushing these forward just because they met the 6 out of 9, but then they didn't meet, like, very sensitive ones like that particular line item?
So the way staff was envisioning it, it would be 6 of the criteria that it would automatically come to you. Now, if there are certain ones that you feel are more important for us to consider, such as target mailing areas or large tracts of land, we can certainly adjust our weighting to meet that would make it more of a priority to bring forward to you sooner.
Okay, thank you. I was kind of concerning me, just willy-nilly saying, all right, we got 6 of them, let's shove them up to the Board of County Commissioners, and then we have to discuss it here in the dais, and would probably slow the process down of finding those facts, you know, so I'd appreciate if we take a deep dive into that. So, thank you.
Mr. DeCastro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to make a statement first off, and I really like what Commissioner Hall opened up with. There's so much misinformation on Conservation Collier with what we did previously and didn't do, and we can debate that for forever. But the one thing that is a fact are the aggressive steps we took to make sure the program was managed, not just watched, but it was aggressively managed, resulted in the last 6 months us approving more Conservation Collier purchases of lots in this very room that had been done in years, maybe a lot of years. And, you know, I say that to really thank you and your staff, Ms. Cook, because some of the direction that we took a lot of heat for that maybe people misunderstood or they fully understood it and just disagreed with it. The end result was, are we buying more land with the money that is sitting in the bank that was at the time was very dusty or not? And you can't dispute the fact that in this very room, in a very short amount of time, we've purchased more Conservation Collier lots, which is what the voters said they wanted, and it wasn't happening. Okay, so that's just a statement. I know we might jump all around a little bit on some of these highlighted and crossed off things. The one thing that I heard in your initial presentation that I'm not in favor of is skipping the CLAC. It's one thing to streamline a process, and if I'm convinced that that's what it would do, great, you know, but my initial dive before this meeting and then just hearing, it's another thing if you're artificially expediting something. And Conservation Collier is such a sensitive program. also one that we're talking a lot of dollars and cents, taxpayer money being utilized, things being purchased in perpetuity. I like the idea of vetting. A lot, we get a lot of good information from the CLAC the same way we get great information from the Planning Commission and other steps that are taken before it comes to us. But just leaping to us with some of those steps missed, I would need to know a little bit more about it. And I saw what you said on there. Wow, if it meets 6 of the 9, it just seems like a no-brainer. Just bring it to the commissioners. I still think there's an advantage to, other groups that are part of the process. And yeah, if they unanimously think it's a great idea, then it makes our job a little bit easier at times because they've asked some questions we've already asked. But, sometimes there's a difference between streamlining something and artificially expediting it. And this program is so sensitive. I like that there's many steps. If we're going to vote to eliminate some of those steps in certain instances, I just like to hear a little bit more about why that's a smart thing to do. So that's sort of after hearing you just go through that was the one nugget that jumped out at me as, not a huge favor of it. But I thank you for what you've done in a short time to preserve it. And a lot of them in District 1. I mean, how many times have we bought lots in District 1 over the last 10 years on Marco Island especially? You can count them on maybe one finger. Now you can count them on 2 hands. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Saunders.
Thank you. I'm going to ramble a little bit. So I apologize to the board and the public for that, but I want to make a few comments that are a bit outside of the subject of the ordinance itself, but then I want to get into the ordinance itself. I think there's a misconception on the part of the board as to what this program really is. And the idea is that we would collect revenue for 10 years. It's a 10-year program. Well, it's not a 10-year program. It's a perpetual program. And the idea was that we would collect revenue 0.25 mils or whatever millage rate that was set by the board, but up to 0.25 mils. We would collect those funds over a 10-year period. We would immediately begin to spend those funds, but those funds weren't expected to be spent in that 10-year period. Those funds were expected to be collected and properties to be acquired, and then if it took 15 years to buy certain properties, the funds would be there for that. And the reason I mentioned that is I went back and got the transcript of our September 21st, 2023 second budget hearing. And Commissioner Castro, I think you may have really highlighted this unintentionally, but I think you highlighted it. And you pointed out that one of the things that came out tonight is in the last 2 years they've spent $5 million on properties, correct? And of course, Commissioner McDaniel says plus minus, and staff acknowledges that that's about what's been spent. Well, that doesn't mean that in that particular year it was a $5 million program. It just means we spent $5 million of the $30 million that had been collected, and that other money would be available. So, for example, in year 11, if there was a 2,000-acre tract of land somewhere that became available for purchase, we would have the funds available for that. And so to say, you went on to say, well, now they have $27 million for acquisition and $10 million for maintenance. Staff, is that correct? And the staff acknowledges that's correct. That $27 million plus the $10 million was what was left of the program after a substantial amount was removed for other budget purposes. So I mention that only to emphasize that this is not a 10-year program. This is a perpetual program, and the idea is to collect money during that 10-year period, but the acquisition of properties may go way out into the future. I'll just throw out as an example, in Lee County, there was a purchase of a large tract of land a few years back, and they had the foresight to have the money available for their environmental program that had been collected over the years for that purchase. So that's number one. And then number two, I think what's got people really energized here is that in this ordinance, and I think this may eliminate a lot of the conversation, in this ordinance on 4 different pages of the ordinance, 2, 3, 4, and 6, it says that funds can be withdrawn from this program for any purpose, any governmental purpose. Now, the county attorney had opined at that budget hearing that the board could pull those funds out, that $53 million out for other government purchases. And I think we need to eliminate all of these repetitive statements in here that funds can be pulled out for any purpose, because that is just emphasizing the fact that we really don't have an environmental program. We just have a line item in the budget that we can alter anytime we want to. And it says that over and over and over again, and I think that sends the wrong message. I think the other issue, I think the bulk of the people in this room are probably here to talk about how important this program is for the future. And that's what I'm doing right now, and perhaps if that's what someone wants to talk about, then perhaps they can simply stand up and say, yeah, we agree that this is a very important program for the future. But I think it's absolutely critical that the board understand that this is not a 10-year program, and these funds are really designed for the long-term future, to buy properties on Marco Island or anywhere into the long run. And Mr. Chairman, I think the other issue that perhaps Brad Cornell is going to talk about is the issue of the easements, and I think we should provide him, with the board's indulgence, a little extra time to go through the changes that the environmental community is recommending, because I think he speaks for a lot of the folks that are here in the room. I think if we acknowledge those couple of things, especially the point that this is a multi-year program and funds are set aside for the long-term future, I think that might alleviate some of the concerns of the public.
Commissioner McDaniel.
I want the record to reflect that Commissioner Saunders and I agree with regard to the term conservation Collier. It is, in fact, perpetual. It's important for folks to understand that the maintenance that goes on with the acquisition of any piece of property goes on forever, and it has to be accounted for. It has to be paid for. I have a concern with the statements that are made that it was always intended that the reserves that were accumulated, the interest off those reserves was going to pay for the maintenance. At some stage, that reserve's going to be extinguished through acquisitions. At some stage, if funding isn't set aside at a later date to accommodate for the perpetual maintenance of the land holdings that Conservation Collier has purchased, the funds will expire. It was a misnomer early on in Conservation Collier that the perpetual maintenance fund was established because it had a burn rate. It might have been 30 years or whatever at that particular point in time. I think it was $750,000 when Commissioner Saunders and I first came into office. Now it's up double that. I think we're close to $1.5 million a year in our ongoing maintenance reserves. And so my thoughts are this needs to be addressed at some stage, maybe not today, but we have to plan for the expiration of Conservation Collier as was written with the referenda, and then a hard look at how we're going to accommodate for those perpetual maintenance expenses that are going to travel forever. They don't go away. Unlike the RLSA, those maintenance requisites are put upon the landowner that extinguishes the development rights and holds those lands in perpetuity and maintains those lands in perpetuity. So I think at some stage we need to have a discussion with regard to maybe continuance for longer than the 10 years of the Conservation Collier as a taxation, but specify for maintenance based upon what the maintenance actually is. It certainly travels along that as we acquire more lands, those expenses are going to rise as well. So that consideration has to be addressed at some particular point in time. My 2 points are I would like for the RLSA, the SSAs to be added back in and given consideration to acquisition. I would like to see that. I don't think we should extinguish or not give consideration to the purchase of an SSA if in fact it's determined by our staff, by the CLAC. I agree with Commissioner LaCastro that having the CLAC review, as long as it's not holding up the process, we're all looking to move these things through. And I think if we add that into our processes for the review of those land holdings, that it won't hold it up. We're not going to hold these for long cycles to accumulate 10, 15, 20 of them at a time. We're going to be bringing them through as they go. So I think adding back the SSAs into the lands that could be accumulated or acquired, as long as there are justifiably sufficient reserves to attend to the maintenance, I think that would be a fine thing to do. I have advocated all along that the property rights, development rights that travel with the ownership of a piece of property need to inure to the benefit of Collier County. And if there is revenues that are derived from the disposition of or the removal of those property rights, such as the credits that can be generated via an SSA that hasn't had the credits already removed, or a piece of property within the rural fringe mixed-use district that has the potential and the potential of TDRs for those transferable development rights to inure to the benefit of the county to be utilized back into the fund to assist with the offset of the ongoing maintenance that's going to transpire, that is transpiring now. It's not going to end. That maintenance has to be accounted for at some stage. And then last but not certainly least, with regard to our budget discussions last year, I found it rather distressing in my communications with staff yesterday. There really wasn't a plan for the replenishment of the funds that were utilized last year for other expenses within our particular budget. And I want, if in fact we do leave the language in there that this board or a future board may utilize those funds for something else, I want that to come with a definitive plan for payback, not just plan on the continuance of the taxation at the 0.25 mils and assume that is, because that's money necessarily that Conservation Collier was already going to get in the first place. We removed some of those monies last year to allow for accommodations in other portions of our budget. I want a definitive plan to replace those funds and a set time frame for the replacement of those funds.
Commissioner LaCastro.
I'll try to be brief because I know we got a lot of citizen speakers, and that's what we're here for. But just to get back to Commissioner Saunders' comments about some of the things that I said at the budget meeting, I agree with everything he said, that collecting money for Conservation Collier is, it goes into the bank account, and if we have property to buy, we buy it, and if not, it sits there until something appropriate comes up. My frustration during the budget meetings is I think we had I was significantly disappointed in the inefficiency of the program. That I talked to landowners in my district who were waiting for Conservation Collier, waiting for the appraisal, had heard from the Conservation Collier leadership team 10 months ago and then never heard back. Some of those properties were lost. Some of those properties now have 3-story homes on them, and all the burrowing owls were moved, all the tortoises were moved, and it could have been, as a piece of property that really fit the Conservation Collier, eligibility requirements. Doesn't mean everything that's eligible gets purchased. But there were quite a few properties that never got considered. And to your point, Ms. Cook, that I really appreciated is, I felt even in the short time I had been a commissioner, why almost every meeting aren't we voting on one tract of land, if there is one eligible? And there were plenty, because when a list finally came to us and it was filled with a whole bunch of lots at the time, that to me was a very inefficient process. And talking to some of those landowners, like I said, again, we lost some of those lots because we were slow to move, slow to react. As you said, the improvement that the new team has made is no longer holding on to these properties and then coming to us, twice a year for consideration. The purchase of property moves very quickly, and just because it's filled with owls and tortoises doesn't mean somebody who wants to put a house on it will be scared off. I mean, I see it all the time in my district. So I like the improvements that we made, and that was more of my point, is that we had the money in the bank. I believe we had plenty of lots for consideration. They just they weren't coming here fast enough the way they are now. Like you said, I do want to be onesie, twosied because it's a quick vote. Yeah, this lot, here's where it sits, yes or no, boom, we move on to something else. Instead of, well, you've got list A, you've got list B, you've got list C, here's the priorities. I mean, I think in my first year or two as a commissioner, we voted once or twice maybe on conservation Collier lot purchases, and some of those lots were lost because they had been on that list for a while with minimal contact to the landowner. And I know that because the landowners talked to me and said, oh, I already sold it to somebody else. I wanted to do the right thing, never heard back. And that's the part that I think that we've improved upon. But I agree with Commissioner Saunders. I don't want to waste the money, and the money is sitting there for when it's needed. But I think that we've discovered there's plenty of lots that are eligible for consideration, but if they don't come to us, they sit and collect dust and sometimes disappear. And I'm really proud that you have fixed that. So I'll just end by saying that. But
Thank you.
Mr. Saunders.
Thank you. And I appreciate what Commissioner McDaniel said in terms of having some definitive plan to replenish those funds. My guess is that we haven't received that definitive plan for replenishing those funds from staff because it would be very difficult to come up with a plan to do that. The only way those funds could be replenished would be to extend the time period for putting funds into that account. So instead of a 10-year program, if we made this a 15-year program, for example, and collected money for an extra 5 years, we could replenish what we took out. But it's going to take something like that. It's not going to be how do we take $53 million in our current budgeting situation and replenish those funds over the next several years or for the remaining of the 10 years of the program. That's, I believe, would be impossible. But it would be possible to make this a 15-year program instead of a 10-year program, and that would help generate the money that was pulled out. But I think with those types of changes, maybe that will alleviate some of the concern the public has. But I will tell you, the big concern, I believe, of this audience, and I can't speak for you, but I'm guessing that the big concern is making sure that the 0.25 mils goes into this program and stays in this program some way or another. And if the board is willing to continue to make that commitment that the funds will be replenished in some way, then I think that will alleviate some concern. And I also think, as I said, taking out this repetitive language about pulling money out and using it for any other purpose, I think that will alleviate some concern. And then, as I said, also having Brad Cornell go through a couple of the issues that are troubling the environmental community, I think will save us a lot of time. So that's kind of the thing I'd like to see coming out of this hearing is just this continued commitment to replenish those funds and to maintain this program for the long-term future. And I think that's what we're starting to get.
Commissioner McDaniel.
And just as a point, Commissioner Saunders, just to clarify what it was that I was talking about, the extension of the tax certainly needs to be reviewed, but only in my personal opinion at this stage, to accommodate for the ongoing maintenance. Because again, Jamie mentioned today that it was always perceived that the interest derived from the accumulated funds was going to be utilized to offset that maintenance expense. They're diminishing funds. Both the acquisition and the maintenance fund are continually diminishing. As we buy more properties, there's less money in the fund. As we spend more money annually on the ongoing maintenance, there's less money in the fund to accumulate interest. And so the addressing of the continuation or not of the tax has to come at some point in time, and well in advance. I would prefer well in advance of the current expiration that we have today. The replenishment of what was utilized last year to support last year's budget by our staff can come in a myriad of ways. We've engaged a consultant to give consideration to the priority-based budgeting that we're currently going through, and hopefully savings can be accommodated in a reappropriation of those monies that were utilized elsewhere in the budget last year can begin that process. I just want to make it clear that we establish a repayment plan and not just say that 0.25 is going back in and going to replenish the Conservation Collier Fund.
Let me make a comment or two about the concerns about the commissioners being able to use that money. You know, motive is a big thing, and rationale is another big thing. And last year at our budget hearing, we have this giant thing called Collier County government that we've taxed the people 14 years in a row, increasing those taxes. So at some point in time, we as commissioners, we had to take a look in a spot in time to stop that ship from just expanding and expanding. We had to take some kind of measure to take steps to shrink that government monster and to shrink the need for that. So the Conservation Collier funds that were available, we didn't just look at this as a slush fund or something that was a savior fund for our budget. That's what's been communicated back to us, and that's not true. Just like Commissioner McDaniel says, we implemented, at that point in time, it was our interest to shrink the government monster, to shrink the spending. And so to do that, we funded our budget with those funds because they were not usable in our case. Now, Commissioner Saunders makes a great point. It doesn't matter if they weren't used in the last 2 years or 3 or 4 or 5 years. I understand that. But we took those funds to fund our budget with the intention and the sole purpose of reducing the expenses enough, far greater than the $53 million, so that we could not do an increase on the taxpayers who have experienced higher than normal rents, higher than normal expenses, inflation that's out of control. You may not appreciate those tax savings because you're well-to-do, but I can tell you that we've had countless of people tell us thank you for that. With saying that, that was a one-time, in my mind, that was a one-time thing we did, never to be done again, and that was my commitment when we did that. We wanted to fund our budget with the intention of cutting our expenses with our, he mentioned Resource X with our third party, that's well in process right now. So it's never our intention or our motive to rob Conservation Collier and use it as a slush fund, Commissioner. You shouldn't do that. Money's collected, should money stayed? Yes, it should. But at the same time, it's halfway selfish of the program to have $53 million that's not usable. This program is still subject to willing sellers. What if you had $1 billion in the bank and no willing sellers? What good is the money? So there is a balance in it, but I want to let you know here in the room that our motive was not to do that and do it again and again and again. When it comes to, we may sell Conservation Collier lands and replenish the program with it. Let me give you a great example of that. We're extending Veterans Memorial Highway all the way from Livingston all the way to 41. There is a small portion of Conservation Collier land that we need to purchase to make a retention pond. Not that we need to put C5 commercial on. We just need a retention pond. That's a good example of us being able to sell conservation Collier land for the better use of the community. So, and with regard to Commissioner LaCastro's, bypassing the CLAC, and Commissioner Kowal's comments about putting weights on some of the criteria, if we put heavier weights on some and 6 out of 10 out of the criteria, you're well on your way to approval. And so it could go to the CLAC. I have no problem with that. But if it bypasses the CLAC and comes to me and it makes good sense to do it, let's buy it. That's what we're here to do. And that was the reason why the money was in the bank previously, because it was basically not usable, though it's usable in the future. I understand, it's a good point. But that was our rationale. It wasn't to rob the funds or use it to our best interest, or just because we could. That wasn't the point at all. It was a one-time special cause event that I hope we never look at again, because I hope that we can reduce our expenses government-wise, that we can actually increase the money, like Commissioner LaCastro says, and pay it back. When it comes to the CLAC, I value their opinion, but there's an old adage in business that says you can have control or you can have growth, but you can't have both. And it remains pretty true. So there are things that I think we would benefit from the CLAC, but just automatic, everything that needs to go there, I'm all for supporting 6 out of 10 criteria that are weighted and make good sense to come straight to us and purchase it. I don't want to send the wrong message like Commissioner Saunders is talking about. We just need to say it one time. We don't need to say it for it, because it's not our intentions. It's not our motive. So I'm good just to say it one time where we can use the money in the best interest if it ever happens again. Because I think you've got voted elected officials up here who do care. They listen to you. It matters to me what you say. It matters to me the emails that I get. But it also matters to me when the emails that I'm receiving are not based on true information. The information that you get from Naples News or the information you get from Nextdoor app or from Facebook may not necessarily be all accurate. There's a motive in their message. So I hope that I can clear that motive up for you this morning.
Mr. Chairman, I know I'm not the next speaker on your list, but you made a comment that I think is really important to the point that I was making, and I think will satisfy a lot of folks here in the room. You indicated that we don't need to repetitively say that those funds can be taken out for any other purpose. We need to say it once. I think if you add to that those funds can be taken out for other governmental purposes as determined by the board. However, those funds must be replenished as expeditiously as possible. And at least that sends a message that we intend to keep funding this program. And I'd like for that, quite frankly, to be retroactive to that $53 million that came out, that those funds and any future funds that are withdrawn have to be replenished as expeditiously as possible. I think if we can make a statement like that, I think that goes a long way to at least solving some of the, or eliminating some of the concerns. So at some point, we'll talk more about that.
Strongly, I like the way you worded that. I'll just throw that out.
We'll come up with some wording, but that's something I think will help. But the board then will have to be very conscientious in replenishing those funds. It can't be just a statement, well, we're going to do this, and then not do it.
Yep.
Along that line, and Commissioner Cole, I'll get to you, but along that line, when we adjust the ordinance to where we have the ability on a yearly basis to adjust the acquisition funds and the maintenance funds, it may get to the point near the end where we take 95% of the funds that are available and put it in the maintenance fund because the acquisitions aren't there, which would be, to Commissioner McDaniel's point, there's a burn rate on the maintenance. That goes in forever. So 100 years from now, when we're still doing this, that money needs to be, that fund needs to be big enough to where the interest on it can handle it. And so I hope the conversation this morning is a little more comforting than when you got here, But with that, Commissioner Cowell.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with a lot of things that were said up here, and Commissioner Saunders with the language that you're using. I agree with you. But I just want to remind people that, we keep referring to this 10-year program. This is actually the second 10 of 20-year program. It was already in effect 10 years prior. It was voted back in, I think, in 2020, so we're 3 years already into it, so we've got 7 left. I just think what we're doing, I think ultimately everybody in this room has the same goal in mind of finding properties that fit the bill and what are sensitively and important to preserve, into this program. And I think everyone up here agrees. And we have done, in my 1 year being on a board, I think we were pretty proficient in purchasing these properties over this past year. And I don't know if you were here for the first 10 or not, but, there's always a different way, and, you learn from mistakes, and you learn to be more efficient at times, especially when it comes to using money and purchasing properties. Because even the year I was here, I believe one of the properties that we just approved on the Marco, it was just, we approved it, had a check in hand ready to buy it, and they backed out the last minute because of time issues, or because it's been happening. Because when we get these lists, we get an A list, and we're supposed to get another one 6 months later, and then we're looking at these properties. A lot of these properties aren't even available anymore. So I think what we're doing is much more efficient, and I think putting this language together, moving this ordinance forward to make it more efficient is only going to achieve the goal that I think everybody in this room is trying to achieve, is to get these properties when they're available and be able to purchase the ones that make sense. And I think that's ultimately what everybody wants to do. But when it comes to the part, which I agree 100% with, that we should have that flexibility to adjust the percentage, because it's over that 10-year period prior to this 10-year, everybody just set this number saying, oh, it's 25% goes into maintenance. Well, we know interest rates fluctuate. We're not making as much 1 year as we may on the next year. Maybe we're going to make more next year. So it makes sense to us to project that out and say, well, maybe 35 needs to go in this year, or 45, or maybe only 15, because we're, the Fed's got the interest rate at 10%, and we're making a lot of money on what we have. So it's good to be flexible that way, and then that'll leave more money in the purchase side. So I think having that as our one in our toolbox will make it more efficient also. And I just want to set the record straight. And back when we did the budget, my mindset was that we had an emergency fund, and when Hurricane Ian came, we had about $38 million in there. And after cleanup, and a lot of those properties were very sensitive properties that were, beach, berm work, areas that were protected, waterways. We went out in the forest and cleaned these things up, and part of that emergency fund we used was that monies. And we were down to about $100 and some thousand in our emergency fund after fact. But we had $40 million in the maintenance fund in Conservation Collier. And we had to take, in that budget, we had to put money back into that fund because we were looking at another hurricane season coming up. Thank God we did not have a hurricane this past season. But if we would have, and we wouldn't have thought forward and had the ability to say, all right, well, we used a lot of this money out of the general fund and emergency fund. The fixed properties, more likely maintenance should have went to anyways out of the maintenance fund. We had to put money back in there. And that's why I agreed with that moving some of this money around was best for the citizens of Collier County in the long run. Because if we got hit with another storm, we would be dependent on the federal government and FEMA to come and clean this place up and fix these properties. So we did it without their help. Now we're waiting for the checks, to backfill. And I always thought that would have been a way to put some money back into the fund. But, that's up to staff, and if that's even possible, to, if we ever get some more checks from FEMA from Hurricane Ian, to take them checks and move them back, since we already used the money from the emergency fund to fix these properties up. So that was one idea. But I think what you see here before you, and us creating this language and streamlining it, I think it meets the ultimate goal for all of us, is to get these properties, the ones that make sense, and purchase them in a more efficient way. So I think I'd have to agree with the language and some of the comments we made up here today, so I'd support that.
Mr. Chair, we have 55 registered speakers. 54 of them are here. One is on Zoom, and with your permission, I'd like to call her first. She's been in the Zoom meeting since way early this morning. And then to facilitate, I think, what will be quicker and get to Commissioner Saunders' wishes, I'll call Brad Cornell second. Brad's been seated time from 34 people, which will give him 105 minutes, or put another way, an hour and 45 minutes. He assures me he's not going to use all of that, but that will give him all of the time he needs. So first up, let's go to, on Zoom, Meredith Budd. Meredith, you're being prompted to unmute yourself at this time. Wait a minute. My Zoom person seems to be... Oh, there she is. Meredith, you're being prompted to unmute yourself. And is that you, Meredith, on the phone?
Hear me?
Yes. You have 3 minutes, Meredith.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so very much. Good morning, Commissioners. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak and for being able to go at this time. So again, thank you for that. My name is Meredith Budd, and I am not representing any organization today, but I have spent my career in conservation looking for ways to have win-win, balanced economic development of the county, and the needs for conservation across Florida and in Collier County specifically. And of course, protecting the environment, as you all know, in turn really does help our economy. And I've heard the dialogue today, and I really appreciate the conversation you've had up on the dais about this program and your support for the program. Collier County has a long and proud history of conservation and the natural beauty that you all as leaders have really helped to preserve. It's not a surprise that people continue to flock to Collier County. We have over 1,000 people coming to Florida every single day, and Collier County remains one of the most popular places for people to relocate. There are the revisions that you're discussing, and some of them are good. And I'm commend Commissioner Saunders. I appreciate you for directing staff to work with stakeholders to look at these changes and the changes to make sure the process is moving, seeing all the purchases that you all have talked about today moving forward in the process. Those are good, but some changes are quite frankly a bit inappropriate. I was not yet living in Collier County or even out of schooling in 2002 and 2006 with the ballot referenda, but I know the history. And in 2020, I had the privilege of being an active lead in helping spread the word about reauthorizing this popular program. And I don't have to remind you that 77% of the electorate approved spending tax dollars on conservation. The straw ballot. And so without bond covenants, there is nothing binding you to actually follow the will of the voters. Only your promise and duty as an elected official. So I'm asking you today to keep that promise and reject any proposed change in the ordinance to spend the tax money approved by voters for conservation on any other county purpose. It's inappropriate and directly in opposition to what your constituents voted for. I know you'll hear from my colleagues today, and we've worked with staff for many, many weeks to also urge you to consider inserting language about repaying or replacing conservation Collier funds that I heard you talk about today, and appreciate you speaking to that and putting effort into replacing those funds and putting language into promising to replenish. This will ensure robust funding for the program, continued management, which of course you will discuss is going to need, acquisition opportunities, and also to help reinstall faith in your constituents that you are able to keep your promises. Conservation Collier can be your legacy, and the decisions that you make today on these ordinance changes determine that that's a legacy that you'll want to be remembered for. So I really appreciate the dialogue and appreciate your consideration of spending the money as it was intended by the voters, replacing the money that has been taken to spend on other things, and also moving the program forward in a very expeditious and effective way. So I say again, thank you for the time and the opportunity to speak.
Your next speaker is going to be Brad Cornell. I'm not going to ask the next person to queue up, but I do need to call everyone that's seated time. When you hear your name, please raise your hand. Anita Sargese. I hope I'm saying that right. Thank you. Stephen Sargese. Linda Roth. Sally Ann Ferrero. Sharon Eppel. Andrew Sillen. Candace Forsyth. Juliet Gross. Augusta Rosenmauer. Thank you. Mary Aronin. Lori Beal. Daryl Manning. Wendy De Silva. Pardon me? Okay, I'll take your word that she's still here. Jean Held. John Forsyth. Oh, back there. Thank you. Roberta Berglund. Marshall Olson. Linda Denning. Jan Williams. Sue Heckerman. Paul Bishop. Yuki Bourdreau. Diane Shanley. Elizabeth Arsenault. Martha Bantz. Lois Kelly. Ann Keller. Jeannie Tucker. Rose Burke. Lindsay McCaskey. Deb Angelis. Sure I butchered that. Diane Rhodes. And Gary Bromley. Wow, a record 33 people. We have the timer maxed out at 99 minutes, Brad.
You know, just out of turn, I just want to say how impressed I am with citizens. You know, we've said this before from our seats here that, you know, get the most eloquent speaker rather than 50 people getting 3 minutes. Sometimes that's not the most powerful thing. And for all of you, the most eloquent speaker on this topic is standing at the podium right now. And so I really commend you all for giving him maximum time so that we can make the best decision possible. That frequently happens. I think, like Troy just said, we just broke a record, and so I'm encouraged to hear from Brad, who we respect deeply, and Meredith as well. You know, she's very close to this issue as well. But oftentimes, citizens don't take our advice, and they deserve their time at the podium, but it could have been used more, judiciously. And today is a perfect example of how you all have really come together as a group and, you know, nominated the top speaker. So Brad, don't disappoint the 33 people in the audience, or else they will meet you out in the hall.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, Commissioners, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to address you, and I appreciate my colleagues in ceding time to me. I won't, as Troy said, I won't use this full time, but I do have some slides I'd like to share with you. And a couple of points I'd like to make. I appreciate very much the conversation that you all have had this morning. It has been encouraging and insightful, and so I think you'll recognize some of the themes in what I'm going to share with you as well. And I also want to commend you on making the direction last fall to staff, to the county attorney, and to stakeholders, NGOs, and the public, and your CLAC, your advisory committee, to work on ways to expedite and improve the process to accelerate land acquisition, which is the point of the program, and then to manage it. So thank you for that direction. I think we have made a lot of progress, as Jamie Cook has outlined. We have some additional points to make on those, but definitely great progress. So I will, oh good, this worked. I first want to offer Audubon's support and many others here in the room support for the revisions that accelerate land acquisition. And I'll just identify 3 important spots on there. Section 11, number 5, is where the applications are evaluated as they are received. And that's going to save months in the process. As you all already discussed, that's a really important amendment. Section 12, number 1, where you have updated criteria. Those new 9 criteria are from staff, and they are, I think they're wonderful. The CLAC has looked at those, the public has looked at those, the NGOs, Audubon and the Conservancy, we've all had a look at those, and we think those are much clearer, and that clarity is going to help speed up the evaluation process. And then in Section 12, number 8, the signed contracts that would be sent to the board directly rather than to CLAC. That's always been a perfunctory meeting, which delayed the provision to you for that final decision. That's going to save a month, so at least a month. So that's a really good one. So we support all those changes and hope they will move forward with the amendments when you vote on these. Next, I want to address the issue that you all were addressing in your conversation, and that is the references, the 4 references you have to deleting or to diverting funds. We believe that that is unnecessary, as the budget authority for doing that is with the Board of County Commissioners, as has already been confirmed by your county attorney several times. And you also have a precedent where after Hurricane Irma, you went to the Conservation Collier Land Management Fund to clean up after that huge hurricane. This was before Ian. This was in 2017. So you have a precedent of exerting your authority to use those funds in Conservation Collier basically as an emergency reserve for emergency purposes. And you replaced those funds, which was important. I also want to point out that including text in the ordinance that says the board has the authority to do this is unnecessary, and it conveys the sense to the public or anyone reading the ordinance that you don't support the program. And we know that's false, and we've listened to your conversation today. We know that's not true. So say what you mean in your ordinance. Don't say that you intend to or you have the authority to divert the funds. You already have that authority. You don't need to put it into the ordinance any times. Alternatively, Audubon recommends adding to 1 or all 4 of those diversion references, if you insist on putting those forward, replacement language. And you guys have already brought that issue up. I think it's a good idea. We would support that. Something that goes along the lines of if we need to use this for emergency purposes, then provided all such diverted funds are replaced in the respective trust funds as soon as practicable, or something like that. And I want to note that the land management trust fund, this land management function is a perpetual long-term obligation, as you have discussed, and that the 20-year model that Conservation Collier has used depends on that trust fund principal model that generates interest to fund the annual management. And the fund had been up to the point with $42 million last fall, where you were generating about $1.2 million a year with that interest. The budget was $1.4 million. We were just $200,000 away from fully funding with interest your annual obligations for management. And I want to note that when you voted on your budget decision in the fall, $38 million of that $53 million diversion was to come from the land management trust fund, which was supposed to stay there. It's not gathering dust. It's working by generating interest. So and I will also note, if I understand this correctly, that money has not yet been moved. It's still sitting there, and it's still generating interest. And we would encourage you and recommend that you do leave that there now. So here are those spots where we recommend deleting these 4 references. So it's in Section 6, lines 153 to 155, lines 183 to 186, lines 238 to 240, and lines 278 to 280. We recommend you delete all those. You don't need them. You already have that authority. But if you insist on keeping them, then add some sort of language that we show in red here, provided all such diverted funds are replaced in the respective trust fund or the named trust fund as soon as practicable. And your conversation was leading us all in that direction. We appreciate that. We would like you to fully delete those references and consider that as your primary objective in this ordinance. Now, we have some other revisions that we'd like to highlight for you. I'm not going to go through the details. As Jamie Cook pointed out too, there are several things that are just minutia, but there's a couple substantive things that I want to address. And these are policies that kind of fall in the area of omissions or deficiencies or problems that you can address with these revisions, an opportunity, if you will. And so the first one is on lines 363 to 364, section 8, number 1, has to do with those SSAs, the stewardship sending areas. There's a distinction when you talk about stewardship sending areas. They're not all the same. Some of them are provisional. In other words, they haven't sent any credits or no credits have been used. Those SSAs can be reversed by the landowner. They can change their mind in 5 years down the road and say, on second thought, we're going to undo this SSA and we're not going to generate any credits. We're not going to use any credits. Forget the whole thing. And that's actually already been done. And so those kinds of SSAs it could be beneficial to make sure they don't get used for development or one house on every 5 acres or roads or something like that. So that is a reason to consider putting in the word permanent stewardship sending areas. As soon as an SSA generates a credit, one credit, and it's used to entitle anything, like Ave Maria or a big Cypress town or anything, Neil Communities project in that area, that SSA becomes permanent. It's in perpetuity. And so those are the SSAs that have already accomplished the mission of rural land stewardship, of protecting these resources without public dollars. And so putting that permanent adjective in there would be the way to accomplish that.
Mr. Chairman, if I might interrupt here for just a second. Pardon me. Just to facilitate this, I would suggest that the proposed change here. I don't think anyone's going to have any particular objection to it. I think if the board acknowledges that, because when he's finished and we start talking, we're going to have to go back and figure out what changes he's made. If this is an acceptable change, why don't we agree to it as he's going through these, as opposed to having him finish and then we try to come back with what he's recommended. Is there any objection to trying to do that way? Or let me rephrase that, is everybody in agreement with doing it that way?
Are you asking specifically about the?
Is he eating his time? I mean,
He's got another hour, so much. I don't think he's worried.
Are you talking?
Got all day, guys.
Are you talking Commissioner Saunders? Are you talking specifically about the stewardship, the SSAs,
right now.
the SSAs? And that's on section 8, number 1 you're talking about?
Yep. The one he has on the screen. If it's agreed to by the board, let's say so, and staff will have that, we'll make a note of it.
Well, since we're talking about it, I wouldn't specify that it be a permanent SSA. I mean, 'cause our staff gave us language or talked about the potential. I mean, you said it at the beginning when you started talking about SSAs. They're not all the same, and there may be a time when one that isn't permanent or is permanent, as the case may be, should be accumulated by Conservation Collier, as long as it comes with the sufficient reserves for the ongoing maintenance. I wouldn't be opposed to that acquisition.
The point that Audubon was trying to make and in discussion with the CLAC and staff, the permanent stewardship sending areas are the ones that have the dedicated, they should have a dedicated endowment fund for management, and that should, if you were to buy something like that, or if the state were to buy, or anybody were to buy that for conservation, that needs to come with management money. The temporary ones also have management money, but if they undo that, then that all goes away.
And maybe I misunderstand the statement, but my suggestion was to add back the opportunity on all SSAs as they come to us. We're going to look at all of the variables that are there, but not preclude it strictly to permanent.
And I think your staff, Jamie Cook, pointed out there's much less value in the permanent SSAs because they're already protected. Now, there is one issue that you didn't talk about yet, and I was going to bring it up on the next one because I have a related comment on that, and that is public access. Nobody has public access on any of these private conservation easements. And so it could be that there would be a piece of land that has a permanent easement on it, whether it's an SSA easement or, a federal Endangered Species Act easement or a wetlands protection easement, anything. If it's a private easement, no one from the public can get on there to see whatever those resources are. Or if you had a trail and this parcel interrupted it. So that would be one rationale to buying something that had easements on it. You start to get into some complicated issues when you look at that ball of wax. So you see in the next recommendation we have is in Section 8, Number 4, which is the section about conservation easements generally and transfer of development right credits. That's a complicated issue. Your rural fringe mixed use districts, TDR credits, other TDR credits, and conservation easements, which come in many, many different varieties. We feel like staff has started that process of evaluating that complex issue. We still think it's premature to put it into this ordinance, and that if you want to be buying easements and TDR credits, there's more discussion that needs to be had with your staff, with the public, with your Conservation Collier Advisory Committee, and some of the other advisory committees that would have an opinion about this. So we were recommending you delete that whole section, section number 4 and section 8, just because the conservation easement is complex. There's value in considering it. Like I just said, maybe there's some public access you really want to make sure you get so you can complete a trail or for a flowway or something like that.
Whatever. Mr. Chairman, on that particular issue, I actually raised the issue of purchasing easements, and I would agree with Mr. Cornell that perhaps we have language in here that needs to be worked on a little bit. If we delete this now, we can always come back and amend this ordinance at a future date to include that. So if the board is in agreement, I would suggest that we delete that section for now, have staff come back sometime in the future after it's been perhaps debated and reevaluated.
That was our recommendation.
I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in deleting that opportunity at this state. It's not brain surgery. Buying an easement has a value. Buying TDR, buying land that already has TDRs or credits on it has a value. Those values can be attributed at the time of acquisition, whether they've been already stripped off of an SSA that's already been established in perpetuity, or whether they haven't. The credits haven't been stripped off. So I don't have an interest in limiting our opportunities here. I feel that these statements are limiting to the program and diminishing the opportunity to buy a viable piece of property that does have public access, that is a connection to a particular flowway that we wish to enhance. Staff believes that it wished to be enhanced. So I personally, I wouldn't be interested in making an adjustment at this stage. It may be on a case-by-case basis that we determine that the asking price, inclusive of or not of the TDRs or credits, isn't a sufficient value, but we'll make those decisions as we come along. We'll make a decision as the properties come to us with regard to the value of a purchase of a conservation easement and or fee simple ownership. I think that was one thing Commissioner Saunders suggested. We could acquire and protect environmentally the development of a piece of property by buying an easement.
Mr. Chairman, we don't always get unanimous votes, so I think, again, to help facilitate this, I would make a motion that we delete that provision. If there's 3 commissioners that support that, then we'll delete it. If there's not, then we'll leave it in and move on. So I'll make that motion for today, and that this be reevaluated by our staff and brought back to us at a future date. Okay. I'm getting used to the no seconds to some of my motions.
Well, it just goes back to, I'm not interested in limiting us. We can look at everything case by case, but you can have control or you can have growth. I would much rather lean on the growth side on this area, so.
Okay.
Shall I continue?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Please.
Next issue is the sale. And when you're, Mr. Chair, you brought this up relative to the Railhead Scrub parcel, which is in the path of the Veterans Parkway. So this is line 338, section 8, number 5. The board may sell conservation Collier lands, and we're suggesting that this needs criteria. What lands would you sell? What would you consider selling? And that would be lands that no longer met the purpose of the program. And that would be the criterion that we recommended in red, inserting into this to have, you know, and all the other policies were fine with us, but that seems like rather than just saying we can sell land, well, why would you sell it? Under what circumstances? And so that seemed like a reasonable bottom line criterion. Lines 440 to 442 is section 9, number 1, D. This is similar to that SSA recommendation I had above, which is to describe the kind of SSA, the stewardship sending area, that would be excluded from consideration, and that would be the permanent ones, the ones that have already been protected, that the mission has been accomplished. The next recommendation is lines 580 to 581. That's section 12, number 5. So this is a process one. We're not objecting to the streamlining of the process as is laid out in the draft ordinance that you've got. But what we're saying is that you're missing a little piece. How does the active acquisition list actually come to be? And so this sentence that we've added here in red basically lays out the quick way to describe the creation of the active acquisition list, the AAL. It needed that one sentence that there was a lot of strike through and underlines. It got really confusing, and as you read it, it seemed like it was missing this one sentence. So that's why we are recommending that, just as a process thing, not super substantive, but needed for the process. So those are my substantive recommendations for you. I do want to share a little bit of good news. So last fall, you all approved the purchase of 4 lots that were contiguous on South Barfield on Marco Island. Those lots have something like 90 gopher tortoises on them, a pair of burrowing owls, and a nesting pair of bald eagles. And you may remember that right after you did that, Rosemary Tolliver, who is Audubon, Florida's Audubon Eagle Watch volunteer who monitors that nest, sent pictures of little baby eagles that had just hatched after you approved that purchase. Those eagles now are doing what she calls, I never heard of this term before, they're branching. And apparently eagle chicks that branch have gotten so big that there's not a whole lot of room left in the nest. They're not able to fly yet, but they're walking out on the branch. And so that's good. So this eagle's nest is now permanently protected thanks to your purchasing and approving that purchase. So that's a little bit of good news. And that's a picture of a bald eagle taken by my friend Jean Hall. It's carrying sticks for a nest, and that's on Marco Island. Oops, sorry. There we go. And last, I just want to thank you again for making the direction to streamline the process and understand our criticisms of the diversion language and the solutions to that, and then some of our detailed recommendations for improving the draft that you have in front of you. I know you're bringing this back for voting, but this is a really substantive conversation that you've entertained today. Thank you for that engagement, and we would like to remain engaged, and we will continue to participate, as everyone in the room is very, very supportive of the program and of your leadership of it as best we can implement this program for conservation purposes. And to finish, I just wanted to share a picture that I took. So Michelle Leonard and Meredith Budd and I were out walking on the Panther Walk Preserve. This was a couple of years ago. This is in Golden Gate Estates, right off of Everglades Boulevard. And we were walking along, and it's a very short trail. And all of a sudden, we had to stop really fast. There was a huge mama bear right in front of, well, I don't even know if it was a mama, I can't tell. But it was a big black bear, and you can, it was surprised by us, and we surprised it. So we retreated because that was the smart thing to do.
Good choice.
Yes. And then it ran off another 20 yards into the bushes and stayed there and watched us. And that's it, watching us as we walked by very gingerly. And so anyway, this is what Conservation Collier is all about. This preserve, it's part of a multi-parcel project. You're expanding it through the process, and we encourage you to keep this up. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thanks, Brad.
Don't go away, Brad. Brad, don't go. Brad, don't go away.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Will you go back to your first couple of slides with the language? You suggested removing the language, those right there.
Okay.
If it pleases the board, I'd make a motion to accept this language. I would like to leave the language that's in the proposed resolution to allow for flexibility of future boards, but put the suggested language here in red in each one of those places, just to specifically delineate the repayment of those funds, and I like as soon as practicable. I like this language and leaving that flexibility, because it inevitably will not always be us up here. And so having this specific language added in, I'd be happy with that language in red being added to the proposed ordinance changes. So I'll make that motion.
Okay, so if we took money from acquisition fund to the maintenance fund, are you saying we would have to replace that acquisition fund as well, even though we kept it in the program? Or just for if we had any other county purpose?
Yeah, well, that's the intent of this. It can be transferred between the two funds. Another one talks about moving it out of the fund eventually. I'm pleased with this addition of language that specifies that if the money is moved, then it is replaced as soon as practicable. I like that. That specifies that it is to, in fact, be replaced if it's utilized from one fund to another or for other government purposes. As the case, as Brad said, we have the opportunity to do that now. We have the authority to do that now, but we don't want to have to administer. I don't want to have to adjust the ordinance every time that's in fact done. So I'd accept that language to be added in here.
I just wanted to make sure that it was if we used the funds for any other purpose, yes, I'd say replace it. But if we had to make an adjustment between acquisition fund and maintenance fund in the future, and let's just say it's after sunset, then there's no way to replace that money. As long as the money stays in the program, whether acquisition or maintenance, I'd be good with that.
Okay.
But if we borrowed from the acquisition fund to put in maintenance, or borrowed from the maintenance fund that was fat to buy some property, I wouldn't want to necessarily say we had to do that.
I see your point. I'm actually looking at the end of this tax. I'm looking at the end of the 10-year program. The Conservation Collier, this board's going to have to either continue on with some form of taxation to support the ongoing maintenance, or it's going to be consumed into our general fund or paid for out of our general fund. So I don't have a problem with a plan. Plans are adjustable, but allow for the funds to be replaced as soon as practicable. I didn't have a problem with that language. So,
Mr. Saunders?
Thank you. I'd like to focus on that section as well, or those four sections. I think stating it once, I think we all agree that that's all that's necessary. But I'd like to break it up, I think, into two sentences, and this is sort of a suggestion. At the direction of the board, funds may be transferred between the two funds, period. Funds, at the direction of the board, funds may be transferred between the two funds, period. As determined by the board, funds may be removed in emergency situations, but shall be replenished as practicable, as soon as practicable. So that it's clear that we can take the funds out, but only if there's an emergency that we determine, and that those funds have to be back in. If we need to have that language in there, that's what I would recommend. And I think that sends a message that we're going to be very judicious in taking funds out of the program.
Yeah, and to my point, I can sum it up. Let me communicate a little better. At the discretion of the board, funds may be transferred between the two funds, period. If used for any other county purpose and found to be in the best interest of the public, then we replace the respective trust funds as soon as practical. So we still have the ability to transfer money between the two funds, but if we take it out of the program for any other use, then we promise to pay it back.
And I agree with that. I'm just trying to tighten it up a little bit, that we determine there's an emergency. Now, that's, the beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, so we determine when there's an emergency.
Sure.
And that the funds, and I like to use the term shall to make it clear that we are serious about it. Funds shall be replaced as soon as practicable. We're saying the same thing, but I'm just tightening it up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm okay with shall.
Okay, we shall. Shall is King James.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dan.
I'm not going to interrupt. You can keep this conversation going. I just want to note that I really do not have any control over the people who have attended here today. And I know that not everybody has ceded their time to me. So I just want to note that you probably have some other perspectives out there. So just
This is tangible here for right now, Brad.
No,
I appreciate
I
you
didn't want to
sharing
interrupt.
that.
I just wanted to note that.
I should probably
Before you
interject. I blew
voted
the
on it.
count. We have 27 people left.
I know, I think I'm next. I don't.
Yes, go ahead.
I went back out again. But I just wanted to preference the importance of the period, not the comma, because we learned that 2 weeks ago. Comma, it definitely has a unique bearing on the way you're writing your sentence. No, I agree, because I don't want us to have the idea that people think, well, traditionally we always took 25%, put it in the maintenance fund, 25, 20, over the last 13 years, that was traditionally the number. But if we project something and we need 37% to go into the maintenance fund because interest rates are low and we want to get to a certain point where we know we can maintain, I don't want that to be confused with us taking money out of one fund to the other. That's just us managing the fund and having the ability to manage the fund. And I just want to make that clear. This is only if, for some reason, outside of what we typically move over, because it's only collected into one, then we move a percentage over. So that's always taking one out of the other. We do that normally. So I don't want anybody to get confused that we're taking money out, we didn't repay it. Well, no, we're just managing the percentage at this point. And then, yeah, I'm fine with my colleagues up here and the kind of language we're going at with the rest of the meeting in shell.
So would it be appropriate for me to reiterate what that proposed language is and see if the board agrees? So it'll read, in one location only, at the direction of the board, funds may be transferred between the two funds, period. In an emergency as determined by the Board of County Commissioners, funds can be removed for other governmental purposes, but shall be replenished in the respective trust, or shall be replenished as soon as practicable, and we'll have some flexibility as to where it goes.
The word emergency, it just leaves us so open to so many different, like, how about for the betterment of the citizens of Collier County, or something more of, because there's ultimately more, the county's made up of a lot more people than just the people that are concerned about this particular fund. And you're locking it to an emergency. I mean, what defines emergency? A brush fire?
Well,
I mean, that's an emergency
Yeah,
out in
no,
the estates.
yeah, that's
So
what-
we can take money and then go help pay the firefighters and all that.
That's why I was saying beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. If the board says this is an emergency, it's an emergency, period. It would be our determination. So if there's a hurricane and we need to take funds out, if there's a brush fire, we need to take funds out. If a bridge fails and we need to take funds out, that would be an emergency situation that we would determine. And we would have, and this would be a question for the county attorney, but I'm sure he will agree, that whatever emergency we determine, that's going to justify removing the funds. So we'd have tremendous flexibility, but I think it sends a message that, you know, we can't just take it out because we want to buy flowers for staff.
Well, I don't think that would ever happen.
I don't think it would either, but, but Mr. Klatskow, am I overstating what the flexibility would be with the board if we used the word emergency in there?
No, I mean, emergency would be defined by the board, 3 votes is an emergency.
So I think it puts a little bit of pressure on us to have it be a legitimate emergency, and then having the language shall be replaced, I think also puts a little pressure on us as we get into the budget.
I guess my thing is saying, like my example, I said we have brush fires a lot out in the estates, and we can all agree that we have a state of emergency at a countywide level, you know, and then we get some things burned up, and the monies we spend on that to fight those fires, or we probably 3 of us would agree that's an emergency. Now, would we be taking money out of this fund? That's what I'm saying. I want to kind of protect it, because you can articulate emergency a lot of ways, and if all you need is three votes, then, you know, that.
I certainly would support being more restrictive, but I don't know how you do it. And give you.
I guess that's what I'm trying to look for, a language that says, you know, just kind of like anything else, you know, the betterment of the citizens of Collier County, it takes a lot of weight to say, like to take eminence domain or something, to come over and take people's property for the betterment. It takes a lot more weight to do that than it does just declare an emergency. Okay. That's all. I'm just trying to find the right language, I guess. That's all.
And maybe we need to put some language in here today, and we can kind of work on that over the next several days to be more restrictive. But either way you want to say it, if you want to say it that way, that's fine, and then we can massage that over the next couple of weeks as this comes back.
I'm just
But
starting.
we're trying to accomplish the same thing.
Yeah, I think so. It's just.
We're trying to make it more restrictive, but recognizing that the board does have to have some flexibility. And that's why I was using the term emergency, because that just seemed to narrow it to some extent. When you say to the betterment of the county, I think that's.
It's ultimately our goal.
Yeah. So either way for right now, but I think we probably need to work on it a little bit.
3 board members have to approve whatever purpose it is, so that's going to make it important anyway. Commissioner McDaniel.
And I agree with saying it 4 times. I even mentioned that when it came before me before, saying it 4 times that it can be utilized for other purposes was a bit repetitive. So saying it once is fine. Pick one of the places that it says it. I like the language that's in here now with regard to the flexibility that the board has to utilize the funds if it's deemed to be by majority vote in the public interest, whether it's buying flowers for staff or a fire in Golden Gate Estates. I don't think having to delineate it as an emergency is a requisite. I think that the language that's pick one of these places, 183 through 186, 153 through 155, stipulates what the intent is. I think it's most important, and we all talked about it at the beginning of this, that we have language, whether we say it 4 times or say it once, we have specific language that says that the funds shall, that's restrictive enough, shall be replaced as soon as practicable, period. And don't make any adjustments to what's already in print and been advertised. Pick one place that best typifies that intent and put it in there, and then we're good.
Commissioner Castro.
I think you all are saying very similar things the same way. You know, we were guilty, at our last meeting, I say guilty, but, you know, having a 3-hour meeting over a comma, I thought was kind of embarrassing when we're here to do the work of the people. I think let's all try to combine the best verbiage, but we're trying to make this more restrictive, I think I am anyway, more specificity. But, in my previous life, I've sat in meetings like this where we talked for 2 hours because, it had the word small dog and somebody wanted to change it out with the word puppy. And it's like we're saying the same thing. So I think everything you all have said accomplishes the same thing. We got off the rails a little bit, I think, and I know what Commissioner Colwell was saying, but I think that was a little less specific than I'm happy with, about just, being a little too generic. I like the word emergency. And also, too, we have to be held to this, so it's not like this automatically rubber stamps approval. It would come to us, and, if we thought something was an emergency and after discussion we felt like it wasn't, then we wouldn't touch this money. But And I also agree that it doesn't need to be in every paragraph. But let's get down to brass tacks here and not have a 3-hour conversation on where a comma should go. It does matter, but let's make some command decisions here. I mean, we're looking at 3 sentences, and we shouldn't have to be here for 3 hours. All the right words are in there. It's just a matter of moving it around. The sentences I heard that made the most sense to me is the way Commissioner Saunders summarized it. It just seemed like where to put the period, the word emergency, and I think to sit here and debate a word or two or whatever, in the end it comes down to intention. And the intention in my book is to make this more specific and, yes, more restrictive. So it's a very unique circumstance where we do anything with this money. I think last fall it was a unique circumstance, but I think if those words are in there and they're maybe only in one paragraph, or if it needs to be in another paragraph for more impact, okay. But somebody summarize this paragraph, and let's make some decisive decisions here rather than wordsmithing this thing to death, and staying very specific and restrictive, which is I think what we're all wanting to do with this for the betterment of this program.
Mr. Saunders.
I will go ahead and make a motion on this language just to see if there's consensus here. At the direction of the board, funds may be transferred between the 2 funds, period. In the event of an emergency, as determined by the Board of County Commissioners, funds may be withdrawn, provided all such diverted funds shall be replaced as soon as practicable.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
And this will be in one place.
That's just one place.
And then we can massage this a little later on when it comes back.
Brad, what else?
Commissioners, I've actually completed my presentation to you, and so you may want to hear from some others in the public before you vote too many more times. The issue of the emergency fund, since that was such a big issue in people's comments and our view of this, one of the main objectives that our recommendations are steering towards is and this goes back to your budget hearings in the fall, is the relative lack of a reserve fund. And Commissioner Colwell, you were mentioning this as well. The Conservation Collier Management Trust Fund has been a de facto reserve fund for your programs, all your programs. And so I guess I would just encourage you, as you look at this language and when you finalize it, when you vote on it in the end, March 26th or whenever you bring this back for the final vote, consider perhaps how that helps achieve that, so that you're doing double duty. You're providing the management income annually for Conservation Collier at a really robust level, $1.5 million a year or more, and it's a de facto reserve fund. So that concept was what we were driving at in saying replenish the funds, and it's what attends some of the other comments were made. But that's, if I can just lay that out there. So thank you for listening to my longer than usual comments, but appreciate the conversation.
Chair, we are definitely due for a court reporter break.
Yes, it's a good time for lunch. I apologize to the other 27, but you know what, we have a 1:30 time certain. This is county business. It's not all about Conservation Collier. We have a lot more to do today. So let's get back here at 12:15.
Really?
What's that?
We can't go back in time.
Oh, excuse me, 1:15. 1:15 be good.